Chapter 1, The Departure. The full moon hung heavy in the sky, casting a silvery glow across the forest. Its light shimmered through the dense canopy of towering trees, where the soft rustling of leaves was the only sound that broke the night's silence. The scent of pine and earth clung to the air, and the occasional snap of a twig beneath heavy paws echoed through the shadows. Isabella stood at the edge of the clearing, her heart pounding in her chest. The weight of the moment hung over her like an iron curtain, suffocating her with each breath. She watched as Darius, her lover, the man who had promised her everything, shifted from his human form into the magnificent wolf she had come to know and love. His fur gleamed silver beneath the moonlight, and his amber eyes locked with hers one last time. "You knew this day would come," Darius's deep voice rumbled in her mind, the connection between them still strong, even as he stood on the precipice of leaving her behind. "I didn't think it would be today," Isabella whispered, her voice barely audible above the sounds of the forest. Her fingers trembled as she clutched the necklace he had given her, a token of their bond. The weight of it felt unbearable now, as if the very silver itself was betraying her. His wolf form took a step back, his eyes filled with sorrow and something deeper, something she couldn't quite grasp. She had been the one to tell him to leave, to let him go so that he could follow his destiny. But now, with the ache in her chest and the realization that she would never see him again, she regretted her decision. Darius had always been a man of two worlds, a creature torn between the wolf and the vampire inside him. But it wasn't just his nature that made him impossible to hold on to. It was his need for freedom, his drive to lead the pack, to rule. His loyalty to the clan came before anything else. "You'll be fine, Izzy," he said, his voice low and reassuring, though his eyes betrayed the pain he felt. "You're stronger than you think. You'll survive this." She shook her head, her voice breaking as she spoke. "I don't want to survive without you." For a moment, Darius hesitated, as though weighing the possibility of staying. But he knew his duty. His pack needed him. His world was too dangerous for anyone who wasn't willing to live by its harsh rules. He had to go, no matter how much it hurt. Without another word, Darius turned and ran into the forest, his powerful body disappearing into the shadows. Isabella stood there for what felt like hours, her heart shattered, as the cold reality of his departure sank in. She was alone now, truly alone. Her stomach churned with a deep, unfamiliar ache, a loneliness that was almost suffocating. And yet, there was another feeling, one she couldn't name, stirring deep within her. A sense of loss, yes, but also a sense of something new, something growing inside her. She placed a hand over her abdomen, her breath catching. Could it be? Was she carrying his child? The thought struck her like a lightning bolt, both terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. But she had no time to dwell on it. The moon still hung high in the sky, and with its light, a new chapter of her life was about to begin. A chapter that would lead her down a path she never expected, toward a man she never thought she'd need, a man who would change everything. Chapter 2, A New Beginning. The days that followed Darius's departure felt like an eternity. Isabella barely left the cabin deep in the woods where she had grown up. The isolation she once craved now seemed like a cruel punishment, her thoughts consumed with Darius and the child she now suspected she carried. The forest, once a comforting sanctuary, now felt like a prison. The whispers of the wind through the trees, the distant howls of wolves on the prowl, only served to remind her of the life she had lost. She clung to the memories of him, though they were beginning to blur at the edges, like a dream fading with the morning light. She didn't want to believe it, but the nausea, the exhaustion, the tenderness in her body, all pointed to one undeniable fact: she was pregnant. And with each passing day, her growing belly was the only reminder she had left of the man who had once sworn to love her forever. But as much as she wanted to deny it, she couldn't. She couldn't ignore the child that stirred within her, the child she had conceived with Darius, the same child that might now carry his wolfish legacy. The very thought made her both elated and terrified. Her only company these days was the forest itself, and even that felt like a cruel joke. Her connection to Darius's world seemed to fade with every passing second, and she knew in her heart that if she didn't find some way to reconnect with that world, she and the baby would be left vulnerable, exposed to dangers she couldn't even comprehend. And then, as though fate had been waiting for the right moment, a figure appeared on the horizon. It started as a silhouette, a dark shape that moved with the grace of a predator. At first, Isabella thought it was another wolf, but as the figure grew clearer, she saw that it was a man, a tall, imposing figure with a commanding presence that made her heart race in a way that was both strange and familiar. He was dressed in dark clothes, his movements calculated and smooth, as though he had been born to roam these woods. Her pulse quickened, a strange mix of fear and something else she couldn't name. The man approached, his dark eyes locking onto hers. There was something primal about him, something that made her instincts flare up in warning. He wasn't just a man, he was something more. A shifter, like Darius, but different. His presence was commanding, electric in a way she couldn't ignore. "I didn't expect to find anyone out here," the man's voice was smooth, like velvet, but with an edge that sent a shiver down her spine. Isabella narrowed her eyes, instinctively stepping back. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the rush of emotions flooding through her. The man chuckled softly, his eyes scanning her form. "Name's Zane. And you must be Isabella." Her heart skipped a beat. "How do you know my name?" "I've been keeping an eye on you," he said casually, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "There's not much that happens around here that I don't know about. It's my territory." Isabella tensed, her hand instinctively reaching for the small dagger she kept at her side, though she didn't want to feel threatened by him. There was something undeniably alluring about this man, but her caution ran deeper than her curiosity. "Why are you here?" she asked, trying to sound more assertive than she felt. Zane's gaze softened, but there was something in his eyes, something ancient, something wild, that made Isabella's breath catch. "I'm here because I can help you, Isabella. I know what you're going through. And I know what's coming." She blinked, taken aback. "What do you mean, what's coming?" Zane's eyes darkened, the air around him crackling with intensity. "You're carrying a child, aren't you? Darius's child." Isabella's heart pounded in her chest. How did he know? She hadn't told anyone, hadn't even fully accepted it herself. Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. "What do you want from me?" He stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "I want to help you protect that child. From everything. From the pack that Darius left behind, from the enemies you don't even know exist. You're about to enter a world far more dangerous than you realize. And you need someone who can guide you." Isabella's breath hitched in her throat, her body tense as she processed his words. He knew things that no one else could possibly know. But could she trust him? Or was he simply another danger in a world that was becoming increasingly hostile? "I don't need help," she replied sharply, though even she could hear the uncertainty in her voice. Zane's lips curled into a knowing smile. "We both know that's not true. The moment you conceived Darius's child, you became a target. And the moment I saw you, I realized that I could be the one to keep you safe." Isabella shook her head, pushing away the irrational pull she felt toward him. "I don't trust you." Zane's smile faded, but his eyes remained as intense as ever. "I don't expect you to trust me right now. But you will. Eventually. When you realize that I'm the only one who can protect you." Isabella swallowed, her thoughts a whirlwind. Was he right? Was he the answer to everything that had begun with Darius's departure? She couldn't deny that a part of her longed for someone, anyone, to take control, to provide the protection she so desperately needed for herself and her child. For a long moment, they stood there, locked in an unspoken battle of wills. Finally, she sighed, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "Fine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But if you cross me, Zane, I'll make sure you regret it." He grinned, a flash of sharp teeth glinting in the moonlight. "I wouldn't dream of it, Isabella." And with that, her life took a turn she hadn't expected. Zane would become her protector, her guide, and perhaps something even more. The question was no longer whether she could survive on her own. but whether she could survive the chaos that was about to unfold. Chapter 3: Unlikely Alliances. The days grew colder as the autumn winds began to howl through the trees, and Isabella couldn't shake the feeling that her life was slipping out of her control. Zane, though not unwelcome, was a mystery, one she couldn't quite unravel. He came and went without warning, always a shadow in her peripheral vision, always watching, always waiting for something she wasn't sure of. His presence brought an odd sense of security, but also a tension she couldn't ignore. Despite her reservations, Isabella found herself relying on him more than she'd like to admit. When she had nightmares about Darius, when the weight of her pregnancy felt like it was crushing her, Zane was there, quiet, steady, unyielding. His strong arms had become a safety net, holding her when the dark thoughts became too much to bear. She didn't want to admit it, but she needed him. And as the days passed, she began to notice something else. Beneath the cold, imposing exterior Zane wore, there was a tenderness, a vulnerability that he kept carefully guarded. He never spoke of his past, but she could sense that he, too, had known loss. The weight in his eyes spoke volumes, telling stories of battles fought and friends lost, of worlds both beautiful and savage, and of a heart that had been broken far too many times. One evening, as they sat by the fire in the small cabin, Isabella tried to break through the wall he had built around himself. She had been sitting in silence, nursing a cup of tea as the fire crackled, but the need for conversation bubbled up inside her, and she found herself unable to ignore it. "Why are you really here, Zane?" she asked, her voice soft but insistent. "I don't buy the whole protector story. What's in it for you?" Zane's gaze flickered to her, and for a moment there was a tension between them. Something unsaid, something just out of reach. He looked at the fire, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched between them, and Isabella felt herself growing impatient. Finally, Zane spoke, his voice low and laced with an emotion she hadn't heard before. "It's not just about protecting you, Izzy. It's about redemption. I've made mistakes in my past. People I couldn't save, things I couldn't stop. But this, protecting you and your child, this is my chance to make things right. To do something that matters." His words hit her harder than she expected. There was no boastful arrogance in his tone, no hint of manipulation, only raw sincerity. "I'm not asking you to save me," Isabella said softly, her voice trembling despite herself. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I never thought I'd end up here, carrying his child, alone. And now you want to help me. But why?" Zane leaned forward, his eyes dark and intense as they met hers. "Because you remind me of someone I lost," he said quietly, his voice laced with pain. "Someone who didn't get a chance to live a life she deserved. And maybe helping you is the only way I can ever make up for that." Isabella froze, her breath catching in her throat. She had never expected him to be so vulnerable, so human. It made her wonder, what kind of past had Zane come from? What had turned him into the man who now stood before her, offering his protection, his strength? Before she could ask more, the door of the cabin suddenly creaked open, the sound of the hinges groaning in protest. Zane's head whipped toward it, his posture stiffening, as if the sudden intrusion had triggered some primal reflex. Isabella followed his gaze, her heart hammering in her chest, wondering who could possibly be out there at this hour. But when she saw the figure standing in the doorway, her blood ran cold. It was a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that framed a face both beautiful and terrifying. His eyes, a piercing shade of green, locked onto hers with a predatory intensity that made her skin crawl. "Hello, Isabella," the man's voice was smooth, dripping with malice. "I've been looking for you." Zane was on his feet in an instant, his eyes flashing with barely contained aggression. "Stay back, Aiden," he warned, his voice a low growl that seemed to echo in the space around them. "This is not your fight." The newcomer, Aiden, smiled, the expression cold and deadly. "You know I can't just let you walk away from this, Zane. You're deep in my territory now. And I don't like trespassers." Isabella's heart raced. Who was this man? And why did Zane react to him with such animosity? Aiden stepped further into the cabin, his gaze flicking between Zane and Isabella. "I'm sure you're wondering who I am," he said, the mockery in his voice unmistakable. "I'm Aiden. And I've come to offer you a different kind of protection, Isabella." Zane's muscles tensed, and Isabella could feel the heat of the tension between them, like a storm ready to break. "You'll leave her alone," Zane growled, the threat in his voice unmistakable. "I won't let you touch her." Aiden's grin widened. "Oh, I'm not here for her." "Not yet. But the child, now that's another matter." The words sent a chill through Isabella's bones. The child? Was this man here for her baby? "Get out," Zane snarled, his voice low and deadly. Aiden took a step closer, his presence growing more oppressive with every movement. "You really think you can stop me, Zane? You're nothing but a rogue. I have the power to take what's mine, and you can't stop me." Isabella stood frozen, torn between the two men. Aiden's eyes were still locked on her, his gaze no longer just predatory, but something darker, something calculating. Zane, on the other hand, was completely focused on Aiden, his stance rigid with a barely contained fury. But it wasn't just the fight between them that caught Isabella's attention, it was the way Aiden's words hung in the air. The child. What did he mean by that? Was he threatening her? Or did he have some knowledge about her pregnancy that she didn't? She had to know. She had to ask. But as she opened her mouth to speak, Zane moved faster than she could blink, stepping between her and Aiden, his body taut with aggression. "I won't let you take her, Aiden," Zane growled. "You don't own anything here." Aiden's expression twisted into something darker. "We'll see about that." Chapter 4, The Enemy's Game. The atmosphere in the cabin crackled with tension, the air thick with unspoken threats. Isabella's heart hammered in her chest as she stood frozen, caught between the two powerful figures, Zane, the mysterious protector who had sworn to keep her safe, and Aiden, the dark stranger who exuded an aura of danger that made her skin crawl. Aiden's eyes were still locked onto her, as if she were the prize in some twisted game, but his focus shifted back to Zane with a look of disdain. "You always were a fool, Zane," Aiden sneered. "You think you can protect her from me? From us? There's no escaping what's coming." Isabella's confusion grew as she looked between the two men, unable to make sense of the situation. What's coming? What did Aiden mean? Why did he seem so certain that she and her child were at the center of something larger than they understood? Zane's posture was now completely defensive, his eyes cold and his fists clenched at his sides, but there was a certain calm in his movements that Isabella hadn't seen before. He was ready for this, whatever this was. He stood between Aiden and Isabella, protecting her without a second thought. "Stay away from her," Zane repeated, his voice a quiet threat, but with a deadly edge that made it clear he would do anything to keep her safe. Aiden raised an eyebrow, clearly unfazed by the warning. "You're so naive, Zane. This isn't just about you, or her. It's about the power shift that's happening right now. You've seen the signs, haven't you? The wolves are getting restless. The vampires, too. It's all falling apart, and he nodded toward Isabella, is at the center of it." The words hung in the air like poison, and Isabella felt her breath catch in her throat. The center of it? What did that even mean? Zane took a step forward, closing the gap between them with a growl. "You're talking in riddles, Aiden. If you want something, say it. Otherwise, you're wasting my time." Aiden's lips twisted into a dark smile. "You don't even realize what you're up against, do you? Isabella is carrying a child with the blood of both a wolf and a vampire. She's the key to everything. And if you think the pack is going to just let her raise that child without interference, you're mistaken." Isabella felt her heart skip a beat as the gravity of Aiden's words settled in. Her child, the blood of both a wolf and a vampire? Her mind raced, struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what Aiden was saying. Darius was a hybrid, a shifter who carried both werewolf and vampire blood, but her child. What kind of power was she really carrying inside her? She reached out, her voice shaky as she tried to regain control of the conversation. What do you want from me? And why is this so important to you? Aiden's smile deepened, his eyes flashing with an eerie intensity. I don't want anything from you, Isabella. Not yet. But I will. Your child is the one who will bring balance, or destroy it. Whoever controls the child controls everything. And I plan on ensuring that my side controls it. Zane's growl rumbled again, but this time, there was a flash of something deeper in his eyes, a hint of recognition, a quiet understanding of the stakes involved. No, Zane said sharply, stepping even closer to Isabella. His eyes were fixed on Aiden, burning with an intensity that matched the danger in the air. I won't let you manipulate her. This child isn't a tool for your war. Aiden's grin faltered, though his eyes remained cold and calculating. You can't protect her forever, Zane. The world is changing, and you're just a shadow of the past. Your time is over. Zane's lips curled into a tight smile, but there was no humor in it. You're wrong. I've seen what's coming, and I'm ready to fight it. Aiden's gaze flickered briefly toward Isabella, as if taking her measure once again. We'll see who's ready when the time comes. Then, without another word, he turned and stepped back toward the door, vanishing into the night with a fluid, predatory grace that made Isabella shiver. The door slammed shut behind him, leaving the cabin eerily silent. Isabella felt a mix of emotions, fear, confusion, anger, flood her senses, but there was one thought that dominated above all others: her child was more than she had ever known. She had been carrying something, someone, with immense power, and people like Aiden were willing to kill to control it. Zane was still standing in front of her, his body tense and poised for action, but his eyes, those amber eyes, were softer now, filled with a guarded concern as he turned toward her. Are you okay? He asked, his voice surprisingly gentle. Isabella nodded, though the truth was she felt anything but okay. Her world had just been upended in a way she hadn't expected. The child she carried, Darius's child, was far more than a simple heir. And now, powerful enemies were already circling. Tell me what's going on, Zane, she said, her voice shaky but determined. Who is Aiden? What does he mean, the child is the key? Zane hesitated for a moment, clearly weighing his words carefully. Aiden is part of a faction that's been growing in power for years. The hybrids, the wolves, vampires, and other creatures like you, are at the heart of an ancient power struggle. The child you carry, it has the potential to tip the balance in a way that could change everything. For better or worse. Isabella's stomach twisted as she processed the weight of his words. So, what, my baby is, a weapon? She asked, almost disbelieving. Zane's expression softened, but there was still an edge to his voice. Not a weapon, Isabella. But a key. A key to a power that both sides want to control. And it's not just the wolves and vampires you have to worry about. There are other forces at play here, creatures even more dangerous than anything you can imagine. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her shaking hands. Then what do I do? How can I protect them, from all of this? Zane stepped closer to her, his presence overwhelming in the dim light of the cabin. You don't have to do it alone. I'll help you. I swear it. Isabella wanted to believe him, wanted to trust him completely, but the weight of her reality was too heavy. Her world had been turned upside down, and the road ahead seemed full of darkness, uncertainty, and enemies that would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. But in this moment, with Zane standing by her side, she didn't feel completely alone. Maybe, just maybe, she could survive what was coming. But the question was, could they both survive it? Chapter 5. Secrets Unveiled. The fire in the cabin's hearth flickered and crackled, casting long, wavering shadows on the walls. Isabella's thoughts were still reeling from the conversation with Aiden. The night air felt colder somehow, as if the danger she had just encountered was far more real than she had ever imagined. Her child, the child she had conceived with Darius, was no longer just a secret she carried within her body. It was a weapon, a key to something far larger, something she couldn't even begin to understand. She glanced at Zane, who had yet to break his intense gaze from her. His posture was rigid, and though he had promised to protect her, there was an underlying tension in his every movement, as though he, too, was uncertain of what the future held. Isabella took a deep breath, steadying herself. You said there were forces beyond just the wolves and vampires. What did you mean by that? What other dangers are there? Zane's expression darkened, the warmth in his eyes fading into something harder, something more guarded. He seemed to weigh his words carefully, as though every sentence could shift the fragile balance they had between them. It's not just the hybrids, the vampires, wolves, and other shifters, that are interested in your child, Zane said quietly, his voice low and grave. There are ancient factions, older creatures, beings that predate even the vampire and werewolf clans. They've been watching, waiting for centuries for a moment like this. Isabella's breath caught in her throat. Ancient factions? She had no idea what Zane was talking about, but the implication was chilling. What are they? And why would they want a child that's part vampire and part wolf? Zane hesitated, then ran a hand through his dark hair, a visible sign of the weight of the burden he was carrying. His amber eyes flickered with an emotion she couldn't quite place, something conflicted and raw. The old ones, he began, his tone heavy with the weight of history, are creatures that live outside the normal rules of the shifters. They're older than vampires, older than wolves. Some are elemental in nature, beings that control earth, water, fire, air, and some are simply ancient entities with power beyond comprehension. They have their own agendas, their own ancient laws, and they believe that your child is the key to unlocking the greatest power of all. Control over all of them, over the elements, over the future. Isabella's head spun as she tried to digest the magnitude of what Zane was telling her. Her child wasn't just a hybrid, but a link to something even bigger, something far more dangerous. But why me? Why my child? But, if they're so ancient, how do they even know about me, about my baby? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Zane's gaze grew darker, and he looked away for a moment, as though struggling with his next words. Finally, he spoke. Because they can sense it. The blood of a hybrid is different. And when the bloodline of a vampire and a wolf comes together, it creates a ripple, a beacon, if you will. And the old ones, they've been waiting for that ripple to turn into a wave. They know your child has the potential to bring about a new era, one where they reign supreme. Isabella's hand shook as she clutched the edge of the table. That's insane, she murmured. How can one child hold so much power? Zane stepped forward, his voice soft but urgent. It's not just the child. It's the power of the union itself. The connection between vampire and wolf is rare, almost unheard of. It's said that when those two forces come together, they create a being capable of tapping into the deepest parts of magic, a magic older than anything the vampires or wolves could ever harness on their own. Her head swam. She was starting to understand, but it was too much to grasp in one sitting. So, what happens if someone like Aiden? Someone who wants to control this power, gets their hands on my child? Zane's expression turned deadly serious. Everything could change. The old ones don't just want power for themselves, they want to reshape the world. They'll do anything to take that power, to bend it to their will. If Aiden, or anyone like him, gets control of your child, they could ignite a war, one that could wipe out entire species, reshape entire realms. The weight of his words settled heavily on Isabella's chest. Her body trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer enormity of what was happening. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a battle for the future of every creature in their world. So, what do we do? Isabella asked, her voice resolute despite the chaos swirling inside her. How do I protect my child from all of this? Zane's expression softened for a moment, and he reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek. We fight back. I'll be here every step of the way. I'll protect you both. But you need to understand something, this isn't just about hiding. You're going to have to fight for your child's future. for all of our futures. The moment you became pregnant with Darius's child, you became a target. And the enemies coming for you won't stop until they have what they want. Isabella stared at him, the weight of his words sinking in. She had always been the one to fight for survival. She had always been independent, unwilling to rely on anyone. But this was bigger than her, bigger than Zane. This was a war, a battle that would change the world itself. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady. "I'll fight, too. For my child. For everything that matters." Zane nodded, his amber eyes glowing with pride. "Then we begin. Tomorrow. We don't have time to waste." The night passed quietly, but sleep did not come easily to Isabella. Her thoughts were a storm of emotions and confusion, but one thing was certain now: her life had changed forever. She wasn't just a woman carrying a child anymore. She was a mother with a destiny, a legacy that had been thrust upon her in the most unexpected of ways. By morning, she was ready. There would be no more hiding, no more pretending that things could go back to normal. The battle for her child, and for her life, had just begun. Zane was right. The world was changing. And Isabella had no intention of being a passive participant in it. Chapter 6: The First Move. Dawn broke over the horizon with soft hues of gold and lavender painting the sky. The forest, once serene and calming, now felt ominous. The weight of the past days, Aiden's threat, the truth about her child's power, and Zane's promises, hung heavily over Isabella. As the first rays of sunlight filtered through the trees, she sat at the edge of the cabin, staring out into the woods. Her thoughts were consumed with the unknown, but one thing was certain: the life she had known was gone. Zane had given her no time to waste. He had already begun planning their next steps, his determination evident in every quiet decision he made. But as the sun rose higher, Isabella couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Her child, their child, was the key to everything, and whoever controlled it would hold unimaginable power. Zane joined her on the small porch, his heavy footsteps quiet despite his size. He didn't say anything at first, just stood beside her, watching the world wake up. The silence between them was comfortable now, a fragile understanding that had settled over the past few days. But there was an unspoken tension, one that simmered just beneath the surface. They were on the same side, but they both knew that alliances in their world were fleeting, and trust had to be earned. "We move tonight," Zane said quietly, breaking the silence. His voice was steady, but there was a quiet urgency to it. "Aiden has already set things in motion. The pack's movements have been reported, and I'm sure the vampires are preparing to make their play soon too. We can't wait any longer." Isabella turned to him, her stomach tightening at the mention of the pack. "And where do we go? How do we even begin?" Zane met her gaze, his amber eyes unwavering. "There's a place, a neutral ground for those like us. A haven, of sorts, where we can regroup. It's a place that isn't easily found, hidden in plain sight among the human world. It's where we can make our next move without being watched by those who would want to take you and your child." Isabella absorbed his words. A haven. She didn't know whether to feel relief or fear. Could a place like that really exist? A place where she and her child would be safe, out of the reach of those who wanted to control them? "I don't know if I can trust anyone but you, Zane," she admitted softly. "I don't know who I can trust in this world anymore." Zane stepped closer, his expression softening, though his eyes remained sharp and alert. "I understand. Trust is earned, not given. But right now, all we have is each other. And if we're going to keep you safe, we have to stay one step ahead of them. They won't stop coming for you. Not until they get what they want." She felt a chill run through her, but nodded. Her baby was more than just a child now, it was a target. And the truth was, she had never been prepared for any of this. But she had no choice now. She couldn't run from her fate. Her child's fate. "When do we leave?" she asked, her voice firmer now. "As soon as the sun sets," Zane replied, glancing over at the sky as if already sensing the coming night. We'll make our way through the forest to the boundary. Once we're past the clearing, it's only a matter of getting to the haven. Isabella took a deep breath and stood, determination settling in her chest like a weight that gave her purpose. Then we leave tonight. The day passed in a blur of preparations. Zane was methodical, checking their supplies, reviewing their route, and ensuring that they would be ready for whatever came their way. Isabella did what she could to help, but the weight of the world seemed to be pressing down on her at every turn. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows over the forest, Isabella could feel the shift in the air. Tonight was the night. The moment that would change everything. They packed quickly, moving with quiet efficiency. Zane had arranged for a bag of provisions, food, water, and the essentials they would need for the journey ahead. But even as they prepared, Isabella couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was wrong. She felt eyes on her, watching her from the distance. "Zane, do you feel that?" she asked suddenly, her heart rate picking up as her instinct screamed at her to be alert. Zane was already moving, his body tense as he scanned the surroundings. "Stay close," he said, his voice low, as he grabbed her arm and pulled her behind him. "Who is it?" Isabella whispered, her mind racing. Zane's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. "I'm not sure. But we need to move fast." Suddenly, the snap of a twig broke the stillness of the forest, and Isabella's eyes snapped to the direction of the sound. From the darkness of the trees, a figure stepped forward, a man, tall and imposing, his silhouette barely visible against the fading light. It was Aiden. Isabella's breath caught in her throat. How had he found them so quickly? "You didn't think you could just disappear, did you?" Aiden's voice was smooth, mocking, his green eyes gleaming with malevolent amusement. "You're much too important, Isabella. Much too valuable to let slip through our fingers." Zane immediately stepped forward, his body bristling with barely contained fury. "You should leave. Now." Aiden's laugh was low, almost too soft, as if he were enjoying the game. "You can't protect her forever, Zane. You think you can just run away? The world doesn't work that way. You're either part of it or you're not. And if you're not," he let the sentence hang in the air, a thinly veiled threat. Isabella's chest tightened. She couldn't believe this was happening. They were supposed to leave, to escape, to get to safety. But Aiden was already here, and there was nowhere to hide. Zane's hand instinctively went to the knife at his belt, his movements fluid and practiced. "Get out. Now." Aiden stepped closer, his grin widening. "You should have known it would come to this. I have people, things, that you don't even understand. You're playing with forces far beyond your control." Isabella could feel the energy crackling between the two men, like an electrical storm waiting to erupt. But she didn't want to wait. She couldn't. She wouldn't. "Zane," she whispered urgently. "We have to go. We can't fight him here." Zane hesitated, his eyes flicking between her and Aiden. His jaw clenched as if battling his own instincts. But in the end, he seemed to make up his mind. "This isn't over, Aiden," he said coldly. "But if you want a fight, you'll get one. Just not here." Without warning, Zane grabbed her hand and tugged her away from the confrontation, running through the trees with swift, powerful strides. Behind them, Aiden's voice echoed, the words just as chilling as before, "You can't run forever, Isabella. I'll find you." Isabella's heart pounded in her chest as they sprinted through the darkening forest, the sounds of pursuit already following them. But Zane was right. They couldn't stay and fight now. They had to survive. For the child. For everything. And with every step they took, Isabella realized that the battle had just begun. Chapter 7, The Path Forward. The forest blurred around them as Zane pulled Isabella forward, his grip firm but gentle as he guided her through the underbrush. Every crack of a twig beneath their feet, every rustle of leaves in the wind, seemed to make Isabella's heart pound louder in her chest. The danger was real, closer than it had ever been before. Aiden's taunts echoed in her mind, you can't run forever. She didn't need to look back to know Aiden was behind them, or worse, that there were others. She could feel it, like a weight pressing on her chest, suffocating her as they dashed through the thickening trees. Her thoughts were a chaotic whirlpool, swirling with worry and confusion, but there was one thing that stood out above all else: the child inside her. The child who had already become a beacon for every dangerous creature in their world. Zane's voice broke through her spiraling thoughts. Keep moving. Don't stop. Just focus on the path ahead. His words were sharp, but there was an undercurrent of reassurance in them. His confidence, his strength, reminded her that she wasn't truly alone in this anymore. That, for better or worse, she had someone fighting beside her. But the weight of his responsibility, of their survival, was something she could feel in the way he moved, in the tension of his shoulders as he led her through the darkness. Isabella nodded, her breath coming in sharp gasps as she focused on their path. The trees around them grew denser, the moonlight barely filtering through the branches. She could feel the cold sweat on her skin as the chase continued. How long could they run? But Zane didn't stop. He kept them moving, his instincts leading them forward as if he knew exactly where he was going. Isabella had never been this deep into the forest before, and the unfamiliar terrain only added to her disorientation. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of running, Zane slowed, pulling them into a hidden clearing surrounded by thick bushes. The sounds of pursuit seemed to fade, but the tension in the air remained. Isabella's chest heaved with exertion as she looked around, trying to catch her breath, her mind still racing. Zane crouched down beside her, his eyes scanning the surroundings with sharp focus. We'll rest here for a moment, he murmured, his voice low but steady. We can't keep running forever. We need to make a plan. Isabella swallowed, her mouth dry. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing on her, the realization that there was no easy escape. What now? She whispered, her voice shaky. Zane met her gaze, his amber eyes glowing softly in the dim light. Now, we wait. I know a way to get to the haven. A hidden route that Aiden doesn't know about. But it won't be easy. We'll need to move carefully, stay out of sight. And we need to be ready for anything. Anything? Isabella echoed, her heart still racing. The reality of the situation was finally beginning to sink in. She wasn't just running for her life anymore. She was running for her child's future. And that was something far more important. Zane nodded, his face serious. Aiden's not the only one after you. We're not the only ones with eyes in the forest. Isabella's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? Zane's jaw tightened, his gaze hardening. There are more forces at play. I've told you about the ancient factions, the ones who've been watching. They have eyes everywhere. The vampires, the wolves, even the old ones, they'll all be looking for you. We have to get to the haven before they do. Otherwise, we'll be walking right into their trap. A chill ran through Isabella's spine at the thought. The old ones, the ancient beings who had been waiting for her child's bloodline. How many were there? How long had they been watching? How deep did their reach go? I didn't ask for any of this, Isabella whispered, her voice barely audible. Zane's gaze softened, and for a moment, he almost seemed human, his walls momentarily falling. I know you didn't. But it's happening, Izzy. You can't undo it. All we can do is survive. And protect the one thing that matters now. Her eyes met his, and something unspoken passed between them, a shared understanding. This wasn't just about her. This was about the future. Her child's future. A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by the distant rustling of the trees. The forest felt alive, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Tell me about the haven, Isabella said, her voice steady now. Where is it? Zane stood, his silhouette blending into the shadows. It's a place that's hidden in plain sight, a sanctuary. You'll know it when you see it. But it's not easy to get there. We have to avoid the patrols, keep our presence low. The route we'll take is secret. And we'll be staying under the radar, because if we don't, we're finished. Isabella stood, her legs still trembling from the exertion. But she steadied herself, resolute. Then let's go. Zane met her gaze one last time before turning to lead her deeper into the woods. The path ahead was unclear, the dangers mounting with every step. But Isabella knew one thing for certain, there was no going back now. They walked in silence, the sounds of the forest around them now seeming to grow louder, as if the very air was charged with the threat of what was to come. Zane's movements were deliberate, every step calculated as he navigated them through the dense trees and tangled underbrush. Isabella kept close, her senses heightened, her every nerve on edge. She could feel the weight of the world on her shoulders, her child's fate, her own survival, and the unknown dangers that lurked in the shadows. Hours passed, and the night seemed to stretch on forever. The deeper they went into the forest, the more isolated they became. Zane's pace never faltered, but Isabella could feel the tension building, an unspoken urgency in the way he moved. Almost there, Zane muttered, his voice a whisper against the wind. Just a little further. Isabella nodded, but her thoughts were racing. She couldn't help but wonder if they were truly safe, if the haven would be enough to protect them. She wanted to believe it, wanted to cling to the hope that this would be over soon, that she could finally breathe without looking over her shoulder. But something deep within her told her that this was only the beginning. And as the path grew darker, she felt it, an oppressive sense of being watched. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end, and she instinctively reached for Zane's arm. "Zane, do you feel that?" Zane froze, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the surrounding trees. "Stay close." Before Isabella could ask what he meant, she heard it. A rustle from the darkness, a whisper on the wind. Footsteps. Several sets of them. Zane's hand moved to his side, where a weapon was holstered beneath his jacket. He turned to Isabella, his voice low and urgent. "They're here. Get ready." Isabella's pulse raced. The haven could be so close. But now, with danger closing in, it felt as though everything depended on whether they could make it there, and whether the haven could truly protect them. Chapter 8, The Hunt. The forest had grown deathly silent. Even the rustling of leaves and distant calls of nocturnal creatures had ceased, replaced by a thick, unsettling stillness that hung in the air like an oppressive fog. Isabella's heart pounded in her chest, the sound of her breath loud in her ears as she stood pressed against the cold bark of a nearby tree. Zane's figure was close, his body coiled like a spring, every muscle taut with readiness. "I'm not alone," Zane murmured, his eyes scanning the dark, his senses far more attuned to the world around him than Isabella's. "We're being tracked." Isabella's throat went dry. She had hoped, prayed, that they would be able to make it to the haven undetected, but with every passing second, she felt the noose of danger tightening. How many were there? The answer came swiftly. From the shadows, figures emerged. Their movement was smooth, too smooth, like hunters accustomed to stalking prey. At first, there were just two, their forms cloaked in the shadows of the trees. But as they stepped closer, Isabella could see more, the glint of sharp blades and the flash of unnatural eyes, glowing faintly in the dark. Vampires. The word echoed in her mind, chilling her to the bone. These weren't just any vampires, though. The sharpness of their eyes, the predatory nature of their movements, spoke of something ancient. Experienced. Powerful. Zane stepped forward, his hand still tightly gripping the hilt of the weapon hidden beneath his jacket. "Stay behind me," he commanded, his voice low but firm. Isabella instinctively reached for her dagger, which was tucked safely at her side, but she had no illusions about the situation. She was outmatched. The vampires were faster, stronger, and she could sense that they were closing in on her from all sides. One of the vampires, a woman with long, jet-black hair and eyes that shimmered like molten silver, stepped forward, a cruel smile twisting her lips. "So, this is the famous protector. The rogue wolf who thinks he can keep her safe," she sneered, her voice like a melody of malice. Isabella's breath caught in her throat. She had no idea who this vampire was, but there was something about her presence that made the air feel thicker, heavier. Zane's eyes narrowed, but he didn't take his gaze off the vampire. "You don't want to do this," he growled, his voice a deep, guttural sound. "You don't know what you're messing with." The vampire woman chuckled softly, her sharp fangs glinting in the dim light. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm messing with, Wolf. You think you can protect her from all of us? You think you're the only one who has plans for her?" Isabella's head spun, her thoughts scrambling. "Plans for me? For my child?" she asked, her voice shaky but desperate for answers. The vampire woman's smile widened, her silver eyes gleaming with dark amusement. "Oh, sweet girl. Your child is the key to everything. The bloodline you carry, the power inside you, the power inside that baby. You don't understand, do you?" Zane's hand shot out in a flash, grabbing Isabella's wrist and yanking her back behind him. "Stay out of it," he warned, his voice low, a growl slipping through. The vampire woman's smile faded, replaced by a dangerous glint. "You think you can stop me, Zane? I've been hunting you for a long time. I don't care about your old alliances, your loyalty. You're out of time. She's coming with us." Zane's stance shifted, his body poised like a predator ready to strike. "Over my dead body." Without another word, the vampire lunged, her speed so fast that Isabella barely saw her move. But Zane was quicker. He sidestepped just as she reached him, his hand flying to his side and drawing a blade with a swift motion. The vampire woman hissed, but Zane was already on the offensive, his movements fluid and deadly as he blocked her strike. His blade met hers in a flash of steel, and the two began to circle each other, their fight a blur of motion and speed. Isabella could barely keep up, her heart racing as she tried to stay out of the way, her eyes darting to the other vampires lurking in the shadows. She could hear them moving, feel their eyes on her, their hunger palpable in the air. They were waiting for the right moment to strike. Another vampire, a tall man with wild, untamed hair and eyes like ice, stepped forward, his gaze locking onto Isabella. "You think you can run from us?" he said, his voice like a whisper on the wind, chilling her to the bone. "You can't escape what you are. What you're carrying." Isabella's body went cold. "I'm not carrying anything," she snapped, though her voice lacked conviction. "Leave me alone." The vampire's smile was wicked, his fangs gleaming in the moonlight. "You don't even know the power you have, do you? You're just a pawn in a game that's been played for centuries. And you're about to lose." Zane's voice cut through the tension, cold and full of command. "You think I'll just stand by while you take her?" His grip tightened on his blade, and he rushed at the vampire, engaging in a flurry of strikes that made the air pulse with energy. Isabella's hands were shaking, her mind racing for a way out. She couldn't just stand there. She couldn't let herself and her child be taken. But what could she do? The air around them grew thicker, the forest seeming to close in on them as the vampires advanced, pushing Zane back step by step. His blade met theirs in a flurry of sparks, but it was clear he was outnumbered. The odds were shifting, and Isabella could feel the weight of it. The vampire woman who had attacked Zane before turned toward Isabella with a cruel smile. "I've always had a weakness for little wolves," she purred. "I'll enjoy breaking you." Before Isabella could react, the vampire lunged. Her movements were too fast, and Isabella barely had time to draw her dagger before the vampire was upon her. But Zane was there in an instant. With a roar, he pushed the vampire woman away from Isabella, sending her sprawling across the forest floor. Zane was on her in a heartbeat, his movements vicious and calculated, pinning her down. But in that moment, the other vampires advanced, forcing him to retreat. Isabella's heart was pounding in her chest as she watched the battle unfold in front of her. She could feel her own power stirring inside her, the strange, unfamiliar energy pulsing beneath her skin. There was something deep within her, something tied to her child, and she had no idea how to control it. But she didn't need to. The world around her seemed to slow as she reached for that power. Her fingers tingled, the very air vibrating with energy. And without warning, a wave of force erupted from her, sending the vampires staggering back as if struck by an invisible force. For a moment, there was silence. The vampire stood, shocked, as Isabella stood frozen in place, her body crackling with energy. Zane's eyes widened as he looked at her. "Izzy," he breathed, a mix of surprise and awe in his voice. You've unlocked it." Isabella's heart hammered in her chest, the power still coursing through her, like electricity flowing through her veins. But as the vampires recovered, the truth hit her like a ton of bricks. The game was just beginning. And now, she had a target on her back bigger than ever before. Chapter 9, Unleashing the Power. Isabella's body still thrummed with the surge of energy that had just exploded from her, the pulse of power thrumming in every nerve, making her feel alive in a way she had never experienced before. The world around her seemed sharper, clearer, more vivid. Her heart raced, but now it wasn't from fear, it was from the knowledge that she had unlocked something inside her, something powerful and dangerous. The vampires, momentarily stunned by the sudden force, recovered quickly, their eyes narrowing as they assessed the situation. They were no longer as sure of themselves as they had been just moments ago. The vampire woman, who had been caught off guard by the blast of energy, slowly pushed herself up from the forest floor, brushing dirt and leaves from her clothes. Her silver eyes glinted with both fury and something darker, something that could only be described as calculating. "You think that little trick will save you," she hissed, her voice venomous. "You've only begun to understand what you're dealing with." Zane, still standing protectively in front of Isabella, his breathing heavy but controlled, shot a look at her. There was awe in his amber eyes, but also a touch of concern. "What did you just do?" he asked, his voice low and tinged with both caution and wonder. Isabella swallowed hard, her pulse still pounding in her ears. "I don't know. I just felt it. The power, it's inside me. I didn't mean to do that." Zane's eyes softened with a mix of pride and unease. "You don't need to understand it. But that," he gestured toward the vampires who were regrouping, "is exactly why they'll stop at nothing to control you." Isabella nodded, feeling the truth of his words settle deep in her bones. She wasn't just carrying a child. She was carrying something much bigger, a force capable of changing the very fabric of their world. And that kind of power was a danger to everyone, including her. The vampires circled them now, their movements slow and deliberate. The woman who had attacked first sneered, her fangs flashing in the moonlight. "You have no idea what you've just unleashed," she snarled. "The old ones will be coming for you now. The child inside you is a beacon. And there's nowhere you can hide from them." Zane took a step forward, his posture fierce, eyes locked on the vampires. "You think we're afraid of your threats? You don't know what you're up against." The vampire woman's gaze flicked to Isabella. "You really think you can fight us?" Her smile was cold, dangerous. "You're nothing more than a weapon. And you're only alive because we've allowed it." Isabella clenched her fists, feeling the power deep inside her surge once again. She could sense it, feel it just under her skin, her connection to something ancient and primal. It was frightening, but also intoxicating. For the first time, she realized she wasn't powerless in this situation. She wasn't just a pawn. She was a force to be reckoned with. Her eyes flashed with determination, her voice steady as she spoke. "I'm done being a pawn." Before anyone could react, Isabella raised her hands. The air around her seemed to crackle with energy, and as she focused, a powerful wave of force shot out, stronger than before, pushing the vampires back. The energy wrapped around them like a physical barrier, sending them stumbling and growling in frustration. Zane's eyes widened in amazement. "That's it," he breathed. "You're controlling it." Isabella felt the power coursing through her as if it were a part of her very soul. She wasn't just reacting anymore. She was commanding it. She was wielding it. The vampires hissed, their snarls echoing in the night. The vampire woman stepped forward again, her eyes blazing with fury. "You think that little show of strength will stop us? You're still so naive." But Isabella wasn't afraid anymore. The vampires had underestimated her. They had underestimated the power that ran through her veins, power that had only just begun to awaken. She took a step forward, her body glowing with energy. I don't need to run anymore. I'll fight for my child. I'll fight for myself. Zane stepped beside her, his presence solid and unwavering. And I'll fight beside you, Izzy. We don't have to face this alone. The vampire woman's lip curled in a cruel smile. Then we'll just have to teach you a lesson and why that's a mistake. With a sudden, vicious movement, the vampire woman lunged forward, her speed unmatched. Zane was ready, though, his reflexes honed from years of training. He met her head-on, their blades clashing in a brilliant burst of sparks. But Isabella wasn't going to wait for them to finish. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the pulse of power deep inside her, and then, with every ounce of strength she had, she pushed it out. The force exploded from her hands, sweeping through the forest with a deafening roar. The vampires staggered, knocked off their feet, unable to withstand the sheer force of the blast. The air was thick with the aftereffects of her power, and the ground beneath them seemed to tremble as if the very earth was responding to her. Zane took advantage of their disorientation. With a swift motion, he slashed at the vampire woman, knocking her blade from her hand. She growled, her eyes now full of rage, but she was struggling to regain her footing, still reeling from the shock of Isabella's power. Isabella didn't wait for her to recover. She took a step forward, focusing on the vampire woman, and let the power surge through her again, this time more controlled. The force hit the vampire like a battering ram, sending her flying back, crashing into a tree with a sickening thud. For a moment, there was silence. The other vampires hesitated, unsure whether to continue the fight or retreat. Isabella's breathing was ragged, her body exhausted from the intense use of power, but she refused to show weakness. She could feel the child growing within her, the energy from the baby mingling with her own. "This is your last warning," Zane growled, his voice fierce and unwavering. "Leave now. Or I will make you." The remaining vampires exchanged glances, their expressions filled with uncertainty. It was clear that the power Isabella had unleashed had shaken them. The vampire woman struggled to stand, her eyes blazing with fury, but she said nothing. Her pride wouldn't allow her to retreat. The moment stretched, the tension in the air thick and heavy. Finally, the vampire woman, her face twisted in a snarl, looked toward the others. "We'll be back," she spat, her voice low and venomous. "You can't run forever." With one final glare at Isabella, the vampires retreated into the forest, disappearing into the darkness. Zane stood still, his gaze never leaving the trees as they vanished. He turned to Isabella, his expression softening as he approached her. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. Isabella nodded, though her body trembled from the intensity of the encounter. "I'm fine. But I didn't expect to do that. To have that kind of power." Zane placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch grounding her. "It's not surprising. You're carrying something powerful inside you. You just need to learn how to control it. And I'll help you. We'll figure this out, together." Isabella met his gaze, her heart still racing, but something inside her shifted. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't alone in this fight. She had Zane. She had the power inside her. And she had a purpose. The road ahead was still uncertain. The vampires would come again. The old ones were still hunting her. But with Zane by her side, and the strength she was beginning to harness, she knew one thing for certain: she wasn't going down without a fight. The battle for her child's future had just begun. Chapter 10: The Turning Point. The forest fell quiet once more after the vampires had fled. The only sound that remained was the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze, the distant croak of a frog, and the rhythmic pulse of Isabella's heart as it slowly began to steady. But though the immediate threat was gone, the weight of the encounter lingered in the air like a storm cloud that hadn't quite passed. Zane stood next to her, his tall frame casting a shadow over the ground as he watched her, his amber eyes assessing her every movement. His hand still rested lightly on her shoulder, grounding her as the aftermath of the battle settled into her bones. "You did well," he said, his voice quieter than before, but still full of the same authority that had kept them alive so far. "Better than I thought you would." Isabella swallowed, trying to steady her breathing as her chest heaved with the effort. She could still feel the rush of power pulsing under her skin, but now it felt like an overwhelming presence, something that could just as easily destroy as protect. "I didn't know I could do that," she whispered, her voice strained. "I didn't know I had that kind of power inside me." Zane looked at her with something softer in his gaze, his expression more open than it had been before. "You do. And it's only going to get stronger the further we go." His eyes flickered down to her abdomen, where the child inside her was already growing, already changing things in ways Isabella couldn't understand. The child, they're connected to it. All of this, all the danger, it's because of what's growing inside you. Isabella rubbed her hand over her stomach, the weight of his words sinking in. "How long until it's too late? Until I can't control it?" Zane's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away from her. "That's something we'll have to figure out as we go. But right now, we don't have the luxury of waiting. We need to get to the haven. The longer we stay here, the more likely it is that Aiden and the others will return with reinforcements." She nodded, the urgency in his words clear. But a knot of doubt twisted in her gut. How could we outrun them? The power they now knew she possessed made her a target, not only for the vampires but for any force looking to control the ancient magic that pulsed inside her. "Let's go," she said finally, her voice quiet but firm. She wasn't going to let fear control her any longer. Zane gave her a brief, approving nod before turning back toward the path. "Follow me closely. We've got a long way to go before we're truly safe." The rest of the night passed in mere silence, the forest now an even more intimidating place than it had been when they first started. The trees seemed to loom higher, casting darker shadows, and the very air felt thick with hidden dangers. They moved swiftly but cautiously, keeping to the terrain they both knew well. Though they stayed on alert, there was a comfort in their proximity to one another. Isabella could feel the strength in Zane's presence, the certainty in the way he led them. His movements were fluid, practiced, as though he'd been preparing for this moment for far longer than she could comprehend. Isabella, on the other hand, still felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her. She was no longer the girl who had lived a quiet life in the forest. She wasn't just carrying a child. She was a key, an object of power that many would kill for. The thought of the old ones, the ancient forces that Zane had spoken of, still made her uneasy. She had no idea what they were or how they had known about her child. How long had they been watching her? Waiting for this moment? Zane stopped suddenly, his head cocked to the side as if listening for something just beyond the edge of her hearing. Isabella froze, her senses immediately sharpening, the quiet of the night now seeming louder than ever. Zane turned to her, his face hard. "We're getting close. The haven is just beyond the next ridge. But we're not the only ones making their way there. Keep your guard up." Isabella nodded, her pulse quickening as she realized they were about to reach the safe house. Finally, she thought. A place where we can rest, regroup, recover. But the moment she allowed herself to think of safety, a sharp crack rang out, followed by a howl that sent a shiver down her spine. Her breath caught. "That's not a wolf," she said, her voice low with fear. Zane's expression hardened. "It's not. We've been tracked." Before she could respond, the sound of more footsteps, more than she could count, cracked through the underbrush around them, a forest of shadows that moved with swift, terrifying coordination. The unmistakable presence of a pack. Zane stepped forward, his body braced for action, his eyes scanning the trees. "They're close." Isabella could feel her breath hitch in her chest. She had no idea how many were out there, but she knew this wasn't just a simple hunt. This was something much worse. From the shadows, figures began to emerge, wolves, vampires, and others she couldn't even identify. They were surrounded. Zane immediately placed himself in front of her, his eyes flashing. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his voice carrying a note of finality that left no room for argument. The leader of the pack, a massive figure who seemed to tower over the others, stepped into the clearing, his eyes glowing with an eerie, predatory light. He was dressed in dark clothes, his features sharp and angular. But it wasn't just his appearance that made him stand out. It was the aura of power that radiated off him like a force field. "You've been busy, haven't you, Zane?" the man said, his voice deep and cold, each word dripping with contempt. "But it's time for you to hand her over." Isabella's heart pounded in her chest. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice shaking despite her best efforts to sound strong. The man's lips twisted into a smile, revealing fangs that gleamed in the moonlight. "I'm someone who's been looking for you." Aiden was just the beginning. Zane's hand shot out, his grip tightening around a weapon she hadn't seen before, a sleek, silver dagger. "You won't take her," he growled. The man's smile only grew. "You'll try to stop me. But you're outnumbered, Zane. And I've got something much stronger than your loyalty." His eyes flicked to Isabella, his gaze filled with dark amusement. "Her. She's the key to everything." Isabella's breath caught. "What do you want with me?" she demanded, her voice now steady, though fear gripped her heart. The man's smile was full of malicious intent. "Not you. Her child. The one inside you. I'll take the power, and there's nothing you or anyone else can do to stop it." The wolves and vampires behind him began to shift, their forms changing before her eyes flashing, claws extending, fangs bared. They were ready to fight. Zane stood firm, his body a wall between Isabella and the approaching horde. "You'll have to kill me first." For the first time since they had begun their journey, Isabella felt the full weight of her situation settle in. They were surrounded. They were outnumbered. And yet, as the tension crackled in the air, Isabella felt something stir inside her. The power. The power that had saved her once before. It was still there. And now, she would learn how to wield it. Chapter 11, The Unleashing. The tension in the air was suffocating, the forest around them holding its breath as the figures, wolves, vampires, and creatures unknown, closed in. Zane stood in front of Isabella like a wall of muscle and determination, his eyes burning with an intensity that she had never seen before. His stance was unwavering, ready to fight, to protect her, no matter the cost. But Isabella knew, deep down, that this time, it wasn't enough. They were surrounded. Outnumbered. And these creatures weren't just here for blood, they were here for the child growing inside her. The leader, the massive figure who had spoken earlier, took a slow step forward, his eyes never leaving Isabella. His grin widened as if savoring the moment. "You're more valuable than you realize, Isabella," he purred. "A being of two worlds, carrying the key to all that we desire. Your child will be the final piece in a puzzle that's been millennia in the making." Isabella felt a shiver run through her, her hand instinctively going to her abdomen, as if she could shield her child from the horrors unfolding around them. "You won't get away with this," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. The leader of the pack stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. He was almost hypnotic, a dark aura swirling around him. "I already have, dear. All that's left now is for you to accept it. All you need to do is hand over the child inside you, and we'll leave you alive." The words sent a jolt of anger through Isabella, and for the first time since she had learned the truth about her child, she felt something else rise inside her. Fear was still there, yes, but now there was a spark of defiance. She wasn't just a vessel for a child anymore. She wasn't just a pawn. She was a mother. And no one was taking her child. The pack leader laughed darkly. "You think you can stop us? You have no idea what you're dealing with." Isabella's eyes narrowed. "Maybe I don't know what I'm dealing with. But I know one thing." She took a deep breath, focusing on the power deep inside her. The power that had cracked through her defenses before. The power that, in this moment, she realized, was more than just a defense mechanism. It was a part of her. A force she could wield. Zane shifted his stance, his eyes catching hers as if he knew what was coming. He gave her a silent nod, a signal that she understood all too well. It's time. The moment she gathered the energy, it felt as though the earth itself trembled beneath her. It started small, a hum inside her chest, then a ripple, a shiver down her spine. The power that had been buried deep within her all this time roared to life. Her fingers tingled with raw, untamed force, and her heart beat in sync with the energy that had awoken inside her. The pack leader and his followers took a step back, sensing the change. The atmosphere shifted from tense to something more dangerous, as if the very air was charged with a promise of destruction. Isabella raised her hands, her palms facing the sky, and the energy exploded from her like a wave crashing against the shore. The ground beneath her shook, and the force was so overwhelming that it felt as if the forest itself was coming alive. The trees groaned as they were pushed back by the sheer intensity of the magic. A barrier of power surged outward from her, wrapping around her and Zane, pushing the attackers back with such force that several were knocked to the ground, their snarls of surprise filling the air. Zane's eyes widened as he felt the shockwave ripple through the forest, but he didn't hesitate. He moved in front of Isabella, using his body as a shield, ready to defend her from whatever came next. His hand gripped the hilt of his blade, but he didn't strike. He was watching her, waiting for her to unleash her full potential. The pack leader, however, was unfazed. He grinned again, his fangs flashing in the moonlight. Impressive. But not enough. With a roar, the pack surged forward, their movements too fast for Isabella to react to. The wolves howled, their fangs bared, their claws scraping against the earth as they closed in. The vampires followed behind, their eyes glowing with hunger. But Isabella's power was just beginning to awaken. As they charged, Isabella raised her hands again, this time with more purpose. She could feel the pulse of her child within her, a connection that went beyond anything she had ever known. The energy she had unleashed before was nothing compared to what she felt now. With a forceful motion, she pushed out again, not just a wave, but a torrent of power, raw and uncontrolled. It swept through the forest like a violent storm, tearing through the underbrush, sending trees splintering and cracking as the ground itself shifted beneath the vampires and wolves. One of the vampires fell to the ground, screaming in pain as the energy collided with him. His body convulsed as if being torn apart from the inside out. The force was not just physical, it was elemental. The energy Isabella now controlled seemed to draw from everything around her, the earth, the trees, the very air itself. She could feel it, everything was in her control. The very earth beneath her feet, the trees around her, the winds in the air, they all responded to her call. And she was only just learning how to wield it. Zane's voice broke through the chaos. Izzy, you have to focus. Control it. But Isabella's mind was already racing. She wasn't just trying to survive anymore. She was fighting for her child, for her future, for the very world that was about to change. The pack leader, now visibly furious, stepped forward once again, his eyes glowing with bloodlust. You'll regret this, child. You think you can control the power of both the wolf and the vampire? The old ones will not allow it. Isabella took a step forward, her eyes locked onto his. Then they'll have to kill me first. The moment the words left her lips, the ground beneath them cracked open. A blast of energy erupted from her, a shockwave so strong that it sent the pack leader and several of his followers flying backward. The remaining wolves and vampires shrieked as they were pushed away by the sheer force, their bodies crashing into trees, their movements erratic as they struggled to regain control. Zane, his own strength now bolstered by the chaos around him, advanced with fluid precision. He moved through the disoriented pack, his blade flashing as he struck at those closest to him, keeping them at bay. But Isabella's focus never wavered. She could feel the raw energy coursing through her veins, her body thrumming with power as the forest seemed to bow to her will. Her gaze never left the pack leader, who was now slowly pushing himself up from the ground, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. Enough, he spat, his voice low and dangerous. This isn't over, Isabella. We'll be back. You can't hide from us forever. With a final, venomous glare, he turned and motioned to the others. One by one, the pack members retreated, their eyes flashing with anger and frustration. The vampires hesitated, but when the leader gave a final, curt nod, they too disappeared into the shadows, leaving Isabella and Zane alone in the stillness of the forest. The tension in the air didn't fade immediately. Isabella's heart was still pounding, her breathing ragged as the energy inside her slowly began to subside. She had done it. She had defended herself, her child, and the life she was still fighting for. But even as the forest returned to silence, the reality of their situation sank in. The battle was far from over. The pack leader's words echoed in her mind. We'll be back. Zane turned to her, his expression filled with both admiration and concern. Izzy, he said, his voice softer now, you have no idea how much power you've unlocked. This is only the beginning. Isabella didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain, she wasn't going to run anymore. She had the power to protect herself. To protect her child. And no one was going to take that away. Chapter 12, The Burden of Power. The forest was quiet now, save for the distant rustle of wind through the trees and the occasional snap of branches underfoot. The echoes of the battle still reverberated in the air, but Isabella's heart was beginning to slow, the adrenaline that had surged through her veins only moments ago slowly ebbing. The power inside her was still there, though, pulsing with a quiet intensity, like a dormant storm waiting to be unleashed again. Zane stood by her side, his presence grounding, as always. But his eyes were fixed on her with a mixture of awe and something else, something darker, more concerned. You're not okay, he said quietly, though it was more of a statement than a question. Isabella shook her head, trying to steady her breath. The energy she had unleashed had been more than anything she could have imagined. It was like tapping into something primal, something ancient, and yet, it had felt natural in a way. As if she had always been meant to wield it. But now, standing in the aftermath, the weight of what she had just done settled heavily on her shoulders. I'm not sure if I even understand what just happened, she admitted, her voice quiet, almost apologetic. It felt like I wasn't controlling it, it was controlling me. Zane's expression softened, and he stepped closer, his tone more reassuring now. That's not entirely true. You were channeling it. You may not understand it fully yet, but that power is yours. It's always been inside you. What you did just now, it was an instinct. But it won't always be like that. You'll learn to control it. I don't know if I want to control it, Isabella said, her voice low. That kind of power. It feels dangerous. Like I could lose myself in it. Zane paused, looking at her with a solemn intensity. You're right to be cautious. It is dangerous. But you have to learn to control it. If you don't, it could consume you. You saw what it did to them. It's not just about protecting yourself anymore. The more you learn about it, the more you'll understand that it's not just power, it's part of you. And the world is going to want it. They'll keep coming after you, after your child. The sooner you get a handle on it, the better. The weight of his words settled over Isabella like a blanket of ice. The world will keep coming after you. She hadn't truly understood the full scope of what she was carrying until now. It wasn't just the vampires, the wolves, or even the ancient factions that would seek her out. It was the power. The child inside her was the nexus of everything, the key to a war that had been building for centuries. And she was the one who had to stand at the center of it. I don't know how to fight a war like this, Zane, Isabella whispered, her eyes dark with doubt. I don't even know how to use this power without hurting someone. Without losing myself. Zane's eyes softened, and he placed a hand on her shoulder, a steadying force. You're not alone in this, Izzy. And you don't have to face it all at once. We'll figure it out together. One step at a time. She nodded, though her stomach twisted with uncertainty. but the truth was, Zane was right. She couldn't afford to let fear control her anymore. She had already taken the first step. She had defended herself. And the child inside her wasn't going to be a passive participant in this world either. It was a force that had been awakened, and now it was up to her to learn how to wield it. As the silence stretched between them, Zane let out a quiet breath. "We'll head to the haven now. It's only a little further, and I think it's safe for now." Isabella nodded, but as she glanced around, the weight of the forest pressing in around them, she felt an uneasy tug deep in her chest. She knew that the haven would offer some measure of respite, but it wouldn't last. They would be hunted again. And next time, the enemy might be closer, stronger. Zane's voice broke through her thoughts, quiet but purposeful. "Whatever happens next, Izzy, remember, this power, the child inside you, it's not a curse. It's a gift. And together, we'll protect it." Isabella looked at him, her gaze steady for the first time in days. "I don't know if it's a gift or a curse," she said softly. "But I'll fight for it. For my child. For the future." Zane gave her a small, approving smile. "Good. That's all we need." The walk to the haven was quieter than the first leg of their journey. Isabella couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, though there was no sign of pursuit. Her senses, heightened by the use of her power, felt the subtle shifts in the air, the slightest movements in the trees. It was as though the entire forest was aware of them, aware of her. Zane, ever vigilant, kept his pace steady, leading the way with confidence. Isabella stayed close, her eyes scanning the darkness, her mind whirling with everything she had learned, everything she had yet to understand. But there was a sense of urgency to their steps, something both unspoken and palpable. Finally, they arrived at the ridge, where the trees parted to reveal a clearing bathed in the silvery light of the moon. In the center stood a large, ancient stone structure, half covered in vines and moss, yet unmistakably solid. "This is it," Zane said, his voice low, as if in reverence. "The haven." Isabella felt a sense of relief wash over her as she took in the sight of the stone structure, its presence somehow calming, as if the very place exuded peace and safety. She stepped forward, her hand instinctively reaching for Zane's, and for the first time in days, she allowed herself to feel a semblance of hope. But as they crossed the threshold, a sense of unease settled over her. This place, this safe haven, was quiet. Too quiet. Zane stopped abruptly, his senses alert. "Something's not right," he murmured. Before Isabella could ask what he meant, the heavy wooden doors of the haven slammed shut behind them, and a deep, rumbling voice echoed from the shadows of the stone hall. "You think you can hide from us here, Isabella?" Isabella froze, her heart sinking into her stomach. She turned to see a figure emerging from the darkness, a tall man with eyes glowing a dangerous shade of green, his face twisted into a smirk. "I told you," he said, his voice cold and taunting. "You can't run forever." Isabella's heart hammered in her chest. Another enemy? And so soon? Zane moved in front of her, his posture defensive, eyes locked on the stranger. "I should have known. You're not getting near her." The man laughed, a low, mocking sound. "You're far too late, Zane. The old ones are already here." Isabella's blood ran cold. The old ones. They had found her. And now, the real fight was about to begin. Chapter 13, The Hidden Truth. The man who stood before them was imposing, his tall form casting a long shadow across the stone floor of the haven. His eyes, glowing a vivid, unnerving green, were fixed on Isabella with an intensity that made her skin prickle. There was something ancient and calculating in his gaze, something that told her he was no ordinary foe. This wasn't just another vampire or wolf hunting her. No, this man was something far older, far more dangerous. The stranger's lips curled into a sly smile, as if he were savoring the moment. "I thought you'd make it here, but I didn't expect you to be so interesting." Zane stood protectively in front of Isabella, his body tense, ready to strike. He placed his hand on the hilt of his blade, eyes never leaving the man. Who the hell are you? Zane's voice was low, dangerous. The man stepped forward, his boots echoing on the stone floor. Names aren't important. But if you need one, I suppose you can call me Thorn. I was sent by the old ones. They're eager to meet you, Isabella. Isabella felt her breath catch in her throat. The old ones. The words that had haunted her, the being Zane had warned her about, the ones who wanted her child for their own. She could feel the weight of their power, the shadow they cast over everything she had been trying to protect. She swallowed, trying to steady her voice. You're one of them. One of the old ones. Thorn's smile widened, but there was nothing warm about it. That's right. I am. And you're quite the prize, Isabella. The child inside you, it's what we've been waiting for. The power that comes with it, unimaginable. Zane growled, his eyes flashing with anger. You won't touch her. Or her child. Thorn tilted his head, his expression amused. You think you can stop me? You've barely begun to understand the magnitude of what's coming. You think this haven will protect you? This is just the beginning. The old ones will come for you, whether you're ready or not. Isabella stepped forward, her voice stronger now despite the fear that was rising in her chest. What do you want from me? Thorn's eyes flicked to her stomach, the twisted smile on his face never fading. You've heard the rumors, haven't you? The child born of two worlds, wolf and vampire, can control the elements themselves. The child's blood is the key to an ancient power. The old ones believe it's the only way to return things to the balance they desire. And if we can control it, we'll reshape the world. A sickening chill ran through Isabella's body. Control her child? The thought was unthinkable, but there was no mistaking the dark gleam in his eyes. He wasn't bluffing. Then you'll have to go through me, Zane snarled, stepping forward, his body taut with readiness. You want her child? You'll have to kill me first. Thorn chuckled softly, unfazed. I'm not here to fight, Zane. Not yet, anyway. I'm here to deliver a message. The old ones are coming for you. And you can't hide forever. Not with the power inside her. Isabella's heart raced. There it was again, the unshakable truth. The old ones are coming. And they would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. She could feel the weight of their gaze on her, even now, in this haven that had been promised as a place of safety. Zane clenched his fists, his eyes burning with an unyielding determination. I won't let you take her. Or the child. Not without a fight. Thorn's smile faded, his eyes narrowing with something darker. You think you're the only one with power? You're nothing but a rogue wolf, Zane. And Isabella, she's just a means to an end. The old ones won't care about your loyalty or your fight. They'll take what they want, and you will have no choice but to watch. Before Zane could react, Thorn's figure blurred, shifting from one spot to another with unnatural speed, vanishing into the darkness of the haven. In an instant, he reappeared, standing in the center of the room, as if he had never moved. Zane was ready to strike, his hand gripped tightly around his weapon, but Thorn raised a hand, a gesture that halted him. The time for fighting will come, Zane. But for now, let me make something perfectly clear. His voice was cold, like ice. We're not asking for your cooperation. We're taking what we want. And if you try to stop us... The air around them seemed to thicken, the very atmosphere turning heavy and oppressive, as though the weight of his words had become tangible. Thorn took a step closer to Isabella, his eyes never leaving hers. Your child, Isabella, will either save the world or destroy it. But it will be ours to decide. It's always been a matter of choice. And you, little wolf, your choice will be made soon. The words were a promise, a threat, and a warning all in one. Thorn turned sharply, his eyes now glowing brighter, like burning coals, before he gave them one final, lingering glance. We'll be watching, he said softly, before disappearing into the shadows. For a long moment, there was silence. The weight of his words pressed on Isabella like 1,000 tons. the old ones were coming. There was no escaping that fact. But what did that mean for her? For her child? How much longer could she fight this alone? Zane stood motionless, his eyes trained on the spot where Thorn had disappeared, his expression dark and unreadable. Finally, he turned to Isabella, his eyes softening with a mixture of concern and determination. "We need to move. Now." Isabella nodded, her mind still spinning with everything she had just learned. She could feel the power inside her stirring once again, the child within her a constant reminder of everything that was at stake. But she also knew one thing for certain. They couldn't stay here. They couldn't stay in the haven, not with the old ones so close. As Zane led her out of the sanctuary, the weight of the future seemed heavier than ever. The old ones were coming, and with them, a storm that would shake the very foundations of their world. Isabella had already chosen her side. The question was, would she be strong enough to face the consequences of that choice? Chapter 14, The Choice. The moon hung high in the sky, its silvery light casting long shadows across the clearing as Zane and Isabella moved swiftly through the forest, leaving the haven behind. The urgency of their situation was clear in every step they took, every snap of a twig beneath their feet, every rustle in the trees. They were running, but there was nowhere to run to. No place where they could truly be safe. Isabella's mind was a whirlwind, her thoughts racing, colliding with each other. The old ones, the ancient beings who had been waiting for this moment, who sought to control her child. Thorn had made their intentions clear. They were coming for her. For the child inside her. The weight of that knowledge settled on her shoulders like a boulder. But in the midst of the panic, there was something else. A deep, unshakable certainty that had emerged from the chaos, the knowledge that her child wasn't just a weapon or a pawn in a much larger game. It was her child. And she would do anything to protect it. Zane moved silently beside her, his eyes scanning the trees, his senses alert for any sign of danger. Despite the chaos of the past hours, there was a calmness to him, a focus that kept them moving forward. He wasn't just a protector anymore. He was a guide, a steady presence in the storm of Isabella's world. She wanted to speak, wanted to ask him so many questions, but the weight of everything pressed down on her. Instead, she kept walking, her thoughts churning in silence as they moved through the forest. After what seemed like an eternity, they reached a small clearing. The trees here were more sparse, and the ground was uneven, covered with rocks and patches of moss. It felt like a temporary shelter, but not one that could hold them for long. Zane paused, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the area. "Stay here," he said, his voice low, yet firm. "I'll check the surroundings. If we're going to move on, we need to make sure we're not being followed." Isabella nodded, her mind still reeling from the encounter with Thorn. She was grateful for Zane's presence, but there was a gnawing fear inside her. Thorn's words echoed in her mind, "Your child will either save the world or destroy it." What did that mean? How could a child, her child, be the key to the world's fate? She placed her hand on her abdomen instinctively, as if trying to protect the life growing inside her. She had never asked for this. Never chosen to be the vessel for such power, for such responsibility. And yet, it was hers. This child wasn't just her own anymore. It belonged to a larger world, a world that wanted to claim it, to control it. Her fingers trembled as she pulled them away from her stomach, the weight of her decision settling in her chest. She could run. She could keep running, hiding from the world that wanted to tear them apart. But that wouldn't save her child. That wouldn't save anyone. She had to fight. As Zane disappeared into the trees, Isabella's gaze drifted toward the dark sky above, the stars glimmering like distant, indifferent lights. What happens next? She wondered. She had never been part of this world of power struggles, of vampires and wolves, of ancient factions. She had always been just Isabella, until now. Suddenly, a voice broke through her thoughts, cold and clear. "You're not going anywhere." Isabella's body tensed as she whipped around. There, standing at the edge of the clearing, was another figure, a tall man, draped in a long, flowing cloak, his features hidden in the shadows. His eyes gleamed with an unnatural yellow glow, and his presence seemed to warp the air around him. Isabella's pulse quickened as she instinctively stepped back, her hand moving toward the dagger at her side. This was no ordinary foe. She could feel the dark energy radiating off him, and her instinct screamed at her to be ready. The man chuckled, the sound low and mocking. I can feel it. The power. The child. You think you can run from them? From me? Her breath hitched. Who are you? She demanded, her voice shaking, though she was doing her best to mask it. The man stepped forward, his movement slow and deliberate. I'm someone who's been sent to collect you. And your child. He paused, a smirk playing at the corners of his lips. The old ones are very particular about their prize. And they've waited far too long to let you slip through their fingers. Isabella's hand clenched around the dagger. Another one of them. She wasn't sure how many more were out there, but this man was no ally. He was part of the same dark web that had already begun to pull her into its depths. You'll have to kill me first, she spat, trying to steady her breath, but the fear was still there, gnawing at her insides. The man's eyes glinted, amusement dancing in them. Oh, I don't need to kill you, Isabella. Not yet. He took another step closer. But you're running out of time. Your child, our child, is a gift, one that will either save or destroy. You don't even understand what's coming, do you? She wanted to lash out, to strike, but the words he spoke hit too close to the truth. How could she understand it? How could she comprehend the weight of the power that was growing inside her? She had felt it stir, felt it surge when she had unleashed it earlier, but she didn't know how to control it. She didn't know how to be the person they were trying to make her become. I won't let you take my child, Isabella said firmly, her voice shaking but resolute. She didn't know how, but she would find a way to stop him. To stop them. The man chuckled again, a dark, hollow sound. You're already too late. You don't get to decide. The old ones will have what they want. And you will play your part. He was close now, his breath a faint whisper against the night air. Isabella felt the power inside her stir once more, a sensation that started low, deep in her chest, and spread outward, but this time it wasn't a response to fear, it was anger. Defiance. With a fierce cry, she raised her hand, focusing every ounce of energy on the dark figure before her. The force that surged from her was like nothing she had ever felt before, raw, untamed, and powerful. The very earth beneath her feet trembled, and the air crackled with energy as the blast of power shot out, sending the man stumbling back. He hit the ground with a sickening thud, but as he rose, there was no fear in his eyes. Only cold calculation. You think that will stop me? He sneered. You've only just begun to scratch the surface of what you're capable of. And trust me, this will be a battle you cannot win. Isabella's heart raced, but she didn't retreat. She couldn't. This was it. This was the moment where everything would change. For her. For her child. For the world they were fighting to protect. Before she could strike again, Zane appeared from the shadows, his form a blur as he rushed forward. His blade gleamed in the moonlight, and with one swift motion, he struck. The man cried out, stumbling backward, but Zane was relentless, pressing forward with every step. With a final, precise strike, Zane drove the blade into the man's chest, his movement fast and efficient. The man gasped, his yellow eyes widening in surprise and pain before he crumpled to the ground. Zane stood over him, breathing heavily, his expression grim. Not today, he muttered. Isabella's heart thudded in her chest, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She had never seen Zane so focused, so deadly. The power inside her thrummed, but she kept it in check, the force contained as she looked at the fallen man. Zane turned to her, his eyes meeting hers. We need to keep moving. There's no time to waste. Isabella nodded, her resolve hardening like stone. Then let's go. The old ones aren't getting what they want. Not while I'm breathing. The path ahead was unclear, and the danger was far from over. But Isabella knew one thing: she was no longer just running. She was fighting. And this time, she wouldn't stop until she'd protected everything that mattered. Chapter 15, The Chase Begins. The quiet of the forest seemed to press down on them as they continued their journey through the darkened woods. The encounter with Thorn had shaken Isabella to her core, but she wasn't going to let it break her. The power inside her, her child's power, was growing stronger, and for the first time, she could feel the path ahead more clearly. But even as Zane led the way through the trees, his pace steady and alert, the tension in Isabella's chest never fully lifted. Thorn's words echoed in her mind, his promise that the old ones were coming for her. For her child. And she knew that no matter how far they ran, no matter how fast they moved, the danger wouldn't stop. She had to keep fighting. She had to protect her child. And the old ones would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. Zane's voice broke through her thoughts, his words low and purposeful. We're almost there. Just a little farther. Isabella nodded, forcing herself to focus. Zane had told her that the haven was a place of refuge, a place hidden from the eyes of their enemies. If they could just make it there, they would have a chance to regroup, to figure out their next move. But as they continued, a sickening thought struck her. What if the haven wasn't safe? What if the old ones had already found it? What if they were already waiting for her? She pushed the thought aside, refusing to give in to fear. She had made it this far. She could make it further. The forest stretched on, its darkness growing deeper with each step. The soft sound of their footfalls was the only noise breaking the silence of the night. Then, in the distance, Isabella heard something. A rustling, a movement in the underbrush. She stopped, her body tensing, her senses on high alert. Zane halted beside her, his eyes scanning the surroundings with a sharpness she envied. You hear that? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Zane nodded, his body coiled in readiness. We're being followed. Isabella's stomach dropped. Again? The thought that they could never escape the constant pursuit made her skin crawl. She gripped the hilt of her dagger tightly, ready for whatever came next. Suddenly, from the darkness of the trees, figures emerged, two of them, their silhouettes tall and menacing, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. They were wolves, but not like any wolves Isabella had ever encountered. Their forms were twisted, their movements erratic and unnerving. They weren't just predators, they were something worse. Something corrupted. Zane immediately stepped in front of her, his stance protective. Stay behind me, he ordered, his voice firm. But Isabella didn't need to be told twice. The sight of the wolves, their monstrous forms creeping closer, sent a wave of anger surging through her. They had no idea who they were dealing with. As the wolves came closer, their eyes locked onto Isabella, their predatory stares hungry. One of them, the larger of the two, growled, his voice low and guttural. You think you can run forever, little wolf? Isabella's grip on her dagger tightened. I'm not running anymore, she spat. The wolf's lips curled into a wicked grin. Then you'll die fighting. Without warning, the wolves lunged. The larger one came at Zane with terrifying speed, but Zane was ready. With a swift motion, he drew his blade, meeting the wolf head-on as the two collided with a violent crash. The force of the impact sent the wolf skidding backward, but Zane was already moving, his blade flashing as he countered the wolf's attack. The second wolf was on Isabella in an instant, its teeth bared, eyes glowing with hunger. Isabella didn't hesitate. With one fluid motion, she sidestepped the creature's lunge, her dagger flashing as it made contact with its side. The wolf yelped in pain, stumbling back, but it wasn't finished. It came at her again, faster this time, its claws slashing through the air. But Isabella's instincts had kicked in. The power inside her surged, and in an instant, a wave of force exploded from her, knocking the wolf off its feet. It flew backward, slamming into a tree with a sickening thud. Zane had finished with the other wolf by now, and he stood beside her, his chest heaving with exertion. "You okay?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. Isabella nodded, her heart still pounding. "I'm fine. But we can't keep doing this." Zane's expression hardened, his eyes scanning the area. "I know. But we don't have a choice. They'll keep coming." He turned to face the direction of their path. "We need to get to the haven now. Stay close." Isabella followed him, her body still tense, her mind alert. But as they moved forward, a nagging feeling settled in her chest. It wasn't just the wolves, or Thorn, or even the old ones. It was something deeper. Something within herself. What was happening to her? To the power inside her? She had barely begun to understand it, and yet it was already so much more than she could control. The moment she had unleashed that power, felt it flood through her, it had been both terrifying and exhilarating. It was like a part of her that had been dormant for so long had awakened, but at what cost? What was she becoming? As they reached the edge of the forest, the trees parted, revealing a wide open space. There, standing in the middle of the clearing, was an old stone structure, weathered by time but still standing strong. It was small, unassuming, yet Isabella felt a strange sense of calm wash over her as she looked at it. "The haven," Zane said, his voice quieter now, tinged with a sense of relief. "We're almost there." But as they stepped closer, Isabella's senses flared. She wasn't the only one who felt it. Zane's body tensed beside her as he stopped, his gaze flickering to the edges of the clearing. "They're here," he murmured. "We're not alone." Isabella's heart skipped a beat. She turned in the direction Zane was looking, her body bracing for whatever danger lay ahead. From the shadows, figures stepped into the moonlight. Vampires. Wolves. And standing among them, his eyes gleaming with predatory delight, was Thorn. "You thought you could escape," Thorn said, his voice dripping with malicious amusement. "But the game's over, Isabella." Zane stepped in front of her again, his posture defensive, but there was a hint of desperation in his movements now. "You'll never take her, Thorn. Not while I'm still breathing." Thorn's grin widened, but there was a coldness to it now, an air of finality. "You're too late, Zane. The old ones are already here. They've been watching you." As if on cue, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble, the trees swaying ominously, and the air seemed to grow heavier, charged with an energy that Isabella could feel in the very marrow of her bones. The old ones weren't just coming. They were already here. And this time, there would be no hiding. No running. The battle for everything she loved, everything she had yet to understand, was about to begin. Chapter 16, The Gathering Storm. The ground continued to tremble, a low rumble vibrating through the trees as if the earth itself was responding to the dark power that had come upon them. Isabella's pulse quickened. The very air was charged with an unnatural energy, something ancient, something far beyond the danger of mere wolves or vampires. Thorn's grin remained, but there was something colder, more final in his eyes. "You don't understand, do you, Isabella?" He purred, stepping forward, his figure casting a long, ominous shadow under the moonlight. "The old ones are not mere beings of power. They are the balance. And that child inside you, that precious little miracle, is a weapon. A force of nature, meant to either restore order or destroy it completely." Zane's posture was rigid, his hand still gripping the hilt of his blade, his eyes darting between the approaching figures, more vampires and wolves, all of them circling, their eyes glowing with hunger and malice. "Move," Zane muttered under his breath to Isabella, his voice taut with urgency. Isabella's heart raced, but she stood her ground, her hand instinctively pressing against her stomach. Her child. She could feel the connection to the growing life inside her. The power. The potential. It was terrifying, yes, but it was also undeniable. What if the old ones were right? What if her child really could reshape everything? Zane shot her a quick, desperate look, his eyes filled with an emotion she hadn't seen before, fear. For the first time, she realized that even Zane didn't have all the answers. He was strong, yes, but this was bigger than both of them. "We need to fight our way through," Zane said, his voice firm, but his eyes locked on Thorn. "They want you. They want your child. But you're not going anywhere without a fight." Isabella's grip tightened around the hilt of her dagger, the cold steel grounding her in the moment. "Fight. Fight for my child. Fight for everything." Thorn tilted his head, studying her with a quiet amusement, as though her determination was an entertaining little spectacle. "You could fight, Isabella. But you would only be prolonging the inevitable. The old ones are already making their move. And when they come for you, they won't care about your fight. They will take what they want." His words were sharp, like daggers, and Isabella felt their truth sink into her chest. She could fight. She could run. She could try to protect her child, but in the end, would any of it matter? Zane stepped forward, blade drawn, his movements swift and decisive. "Get back," he shouted, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "Don't listen to him, Izzy. He's trying to break you. He's trying to make you doubt yourself." But Isabella didn't doubt herself. Not anymore. She took a deep breath, steadying her nerves, and then raised her hand, feeling the power within her surge in response. It started as a small vibration, a hum in her chest, but soon it grew, the energy pulsing outward from her. She wasn't afraid. Not anymore. This power, her power, wasn't something she could ignore. It was a part of her, woven into the very core of her being. The moment she unleashed the force, it felt like the very air around them cracked. The ground shook beneath her feet, and a blinding wave of energy shot out from her hands, crashing into the surrounding vampires and wolves. They were thrown back with a violent force, their screams echoing through the forest as they collided with trees, their bodies crumpling to the ground. Zane jumped back, his eyes wide in shock, his breath catching in his throat. "Izzy. You." But she didn't hear him. All she could hear was the roar of her own power, the crackling energy flowing through her, filling every inch of her body. It was like nothing she had ever felt before. The connection to her child, no, to the world, was so strong now that it was overwhelming. Thorn, who had been thrown back with the rest of the attackers, slowly rose to his feet, his expression no longer amused, but one of pure, unbridled rage. "You're playing with fire, Isabella," he hissed. "The old ones are watching. And you can't stop them. They will come for you. For your child." Isabella's chest heaved with exertion as she took a step forward, her gaze never leaving Thorn. Her body still crackled with power, but this time, it wasn't a mindless surge. She was controlling it. She was directing it. "I won't let you take my child," she said, her voice steady, filled with the defiance she had long buried inside her. "You may think you're in control, but you're wrong. I am." Thorn's expression darkened. He took another step forward, his eyes flashing with a dangerous light. "You're making a mistake. You think you can control this power? You are nothing but a child playing with forces beyond your comprehension." Zane's grip on his weapon tightened as he stepped beside Isabella, his posture protective. "We're not backing down," he said, his voice low and unwavering. "Not now. Not ever." But Thorn only laughed, the sound sharp and hollow. "You don't have a choice, Zane. Isabella doesn't know what she's unleashing. And when she realizes the true price of this power, she'll have to give it up." Before Zane could respond, Thorn raised his hand, and with a single, sharp gesture, the ground beneath them cracked open, as though responding to his will. The earth trembled once again, and from the fissures, figures began to emerge, more creatures, more wolves, more vampires, all rising from the very depths of the earth, as though summoned by Thorn's command. Isabella's breath caught. This was it. The old ones weren't just coming for her. They were already here. "Zane," Isabella whispered, her voice trembling with realization. "This is it, isn't it? The beginning of everything. Zane turned to her, his eyes filled with determination. "No," he said, shaking his head. "This is just the beginning of our fight. And we're not giving up." But the odds were overwhelming. They were surrounded on all sides, and the creatures emerging from the ground were too many to count. Isabella could feel the weight of her choices now. Every move they made from here on out would be a battle. A choice. A step deeper into a war she had never asked for. Thorn stepped forward again, his grin widening. "It's too late. There's nowhere to hide, Isabella. You can't fight what's coming. The child will be ours. I will make sure of it." Isabella's heart pounded, but her resolve only solidified. She wasn't just a pawn. She wasn't just a vessel for some dark, unknown force. She was a mother. And no one was going to take her child. With that thought, she raised her hand again, her focus narrowing. The power inside her surged once more, this time with a clear purpose. A force so strong, so alive, that the very earth seemed to shudder with its might. "Get ready, Zane," she said, her voice strong despite the overwhelming odds. "This is our fight. And we're not losing." Chapter 17, The Battle Unleashed. The power inside Isabella flared, building like an unstoppable storm. It was as if the very air around her was alive, pulsing with energy, crackling with raw potential. The ground trembled beneath her feet as she focused all of her attention on the forces surrounding them. Thorn's smug expression faltered for the briefest moment, his eyes widening as the air seemed to grow heavy, charged with the energy Isabella was commanding. Zane stood beside her, his stance solid and ready, his hand resting on his blade. "You're not alone, Izzy," he murmured, his voice steady, despite the overwhelming situation. "We've got this. Together." Isabella glanced at him, his unwavering determination like a beacon in the darkness. It was the last thing she needed to hear before unleashing the power that had been growing inside her, power she could no longer deny. The child inside her, the ancient power running through her veins, was a part of her. And she wasn't going to let anyone take it away. With a forceful cry, Isabella thrust her hands forward, directing the energy in a sharp, precise burst toward the oncoming creatures. The impact was immediate. A wave of power rippled outward, the very ground beneath the vampires and wolves splintering as they were thrown back with tremendous force. The air around them hummed with the raw, uncontrollable power, and Isabella felt herself teetering on the edge of something more. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze, the dust and debris suspended in the air, the wolves and vampires momentarily halted in their tracks. Then, as if awakened from a spell, the creatures howled and snarled, their red eyes glowing with fury as they regained their footing. But Isabella wasn't done yet. With another swift motion, she directed the power to the ground, summoning spikes of earth to rise, sharp and jagged like the claws of some ancient beast. The earth cracked and groaned under her command, sending the vampires sprawling as the ground buckled beneath them. The wolves growled, their instincts pushing them forward, but they were no match for the force of nature that Isabella was controlling. Thorn, who had been watching with an air of detached amusement, suddenly stepped forward. His expression shifted from amusement to something darker. "You've made a grave mistake, Isabella," he sneered, his voice low and venomous. "You think you can control this? The old ones will never allow it." Isabella's eyes narrowed, her resolve hardening. "I don't care what the old ones think," she spat, her voice filled with defiance. "This is my fight. And my child is not some weapon for you to control." Thorn's lips curled into a cruel smile. "You think you can defeat us with this little display? You've only scratched the surface. The old ones have been watching, waiting for this moment. And you're just a pawn." He raised his hand, and in an instant, the air around them seemed to twist. The power Isabella had summoned faltered, like a wave hitting a strong current. The vampires and wolves surged forward again, their strength renewed, their eyes burning with a hunger that had only intensified. Zane was at her side in an instant, his body braced for the next wave. "Izzy, focus. Don't let them get inside your head." Isabella's breath came in sharp, uneven gasps. She could feel the energy inside her beginning to falter, like a flame that was threatening to extinguish. Thorn's presence was suffocating, his power a dark shadow that seemed to swallow hers. "I can't stop it," she whispered, panic creeping into her voice. "I can't control it." But Zane's grip tightened on her arm, his eyes fierce and steady. "Yes, you can. You've already proven that. You are not a pawn, Isabella. You are the one in control. Don't let him make you doubt yourself." Isabella's eyes snapped to his, and in that moment, she realized something. The doubt, the fear, it wasn't just about the power inside her. It was about who she was becoming. She wasn't just carrying a child. She wasn't just defending herself. She was fighting for everything that mattered to her. For her child. For her future. For the world that was slipping into chaos. She inhaled deeply, pushing past the fear, focusing on the energy that had always been inside her but had only just begun to awaken. The power didn't need to control her, it was hers to command. Thorn took another step toward her, his voice low, mocking. "It's too late. You're out of your depth, Isabella. You cannot fight the old ones." Isabella's gaze hardened, and she raised her hands again, this time not out of fear, but out of pure, unshakable resolve. The energy that surged within her now was different. It wasn't just an explosion of raw power, it was controlled. Focused. The earth beneath her seemed to respond to her will, shifting and trembling as she summoned it to her command. A surge of pure elemental force rushed outward, knocking Thorn and the others back with such intensity that they were sent sprawling to the ground. The air hummed with energy, thick and alive. And for the first time Isabella felt as if she were one with it. The power was no longer separate from her. It was her. Thorn, who had been momentarily knocked off his feet, snarled, pushing himself up with a growl. "You think you've won?" he hissed, his voice filled with malice. "You think you can defy us? You have no idea what you've unleashed." But Isabella wasn't listening to him anymore. She wasn't listening to anyone. She focused her energy, her hands raised, and in one explosive motion, she sent the ground itself rushing toward Thorn and his followers. The earth cracked open again, massive. Chunks of stone and dirt shooting upward in a barrier that trapped the vampires and wolves in a jagged cage of rock. The force of the explosion sent a shockwave through the clearing, knocking the remaining attackers back as the earth quaked beneath their feet. The vampires screamed as they tried to claw their way out, but the earth held them tight. The wolves howled, their desperate attempts to escape futile. Isabella's breath came in ragged bursts, her chest heaving with exertion. She felt like she had just run a marathon, like every ounce of energy had been drained from her, but at the same time, there was a strange sense of triumph. Zane stepped forward, his eyes wide with both admiration and concern. "Izzy, you did it." But Isabella wasn't sure. As the dust settled and the remaining attackers struggled against their stone prison, she felt a new weight press against her. Her powers were growing, but so were the risks. The old ones had been waiting for her. They knew exactly what she was capable of, and now that she had revealed her strength, they would come for her even harder. Isabella turned to Zane, her voice quiet but resolute. "This is just the beginning, isn't it?" Zane nodded, his gaze darkening. "Yes. The old ones won't stop until they get what they want. But we can't stop either. We've made it this far. And we're not going down without a fight." Isabella felt the weight of the future pressing down on her, but there was something else as well. A strength. A fire. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about making a choice. "I'll fight," she said firmly, her voice steady, though the battle ahead was far from over. "For my child. For the world that needs to be saved. I'll fight with everything I have." Zane looked at her, his expression softening. "Then let's fight. Together." And in that moment, as the night grew darker and the old one's forces began to regroup, Isabella knew that no matter how hard the road ahead might be, she wouldn't be facing it alone. Chapter 18, Into the Fire. The cold night air bit at Isabella's skin, but she barely felt it now. Every nerve in her body was alive with the aftershocks of the battle, and the power inside her seemed to hum, waiting for her command. She was no longer the unsure woman who had walked into the forest weeks ago. The girl who had lived a quiet life, unsure of what she was gone. In her place stood a mother, a warrior, and something far more dangerous than any of them had expected. As the dust settled around them, Zane and Isabella stood side by side, their backs to the stone wall of the haven. The air was thick with tension, the eerie silence of the aftermath pressing in on them. The creatures they had fought, vampires and wolves alike, were still struggling against the stone prison she had created. Thorn had fallen silent, but she could feel his presence lurking in the shadows, just beyond the cage of rocks, seething with fury. Isabella's mind raced. This is just the beginning. This is only the start of what's coming. She could still hear Thorn's voice, his mocking words ringing in her ears. You're playing with fire, Isabella. She wasn't afraid of the flames anymore. She'd been burned before. But what scared her now wasn't just the enemies surrounding her. It was the power inside her, the vast, untamed force that had surged through her in the battle. She couldn't ignore it anymore. It was a part of her, but it was also something that could destroy her if she wasn't careful. Zane turned to her, his eyes full of a mixture of admiration and concern. Izzy, he said, his voice soft but serious, we can't stay here. Not for long. Thorn and the others will be back with reinforcements. Isabella nodded, her gaze steady. I know. We can't afford to rest. The haven was never truly safe, was it? Zane shook his head. No. The haven was just a temporary refuge. We need to move, find somewhere even more hidden, more secure. The old ones are coming. And when they do, we'll need a place where we can regroup, plan our next steps. We can't let them catch us off guard again. The weight of Zane's words sank in. The old ones were already here, Thorn had said. She could feel their eyes on her, even now. The child inside her wasn't just a gift or a burden, it was the key to everything. And if the old ones wanted it, they would do anything to claim it. I'm ready, Isabella said, her voice firm, even though uncertainty still clung to her heart. We keep moving. We don't stop until we're far away from here. Zane gave her a small nod, his jaw clenched as he surveyed the clearing. Good. But we need to stay on the move. Fast. Before they could make their next move, the ground shook once again, this time more violently than before. Isabella's eyes widened as the stone prison cracked open, the sound of splitting rock filling the air. She took a step back, her heart leaping into her throat. The wolves and vampires that had been trapped inside began to stir, their snarls and growls filling the silence of the night. Zane stepped in front of her, his body tense and ready. They're breaking out, he muttered. We don't have much time. Then let's move, Isabella replied, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. She wasn't afraid anymore. They will not take my child. The moment the last of the creatures broke free from the stone prison, Zane and Isabella were already running. The wolves and vampires were faster, but Isabella had something they didn't: control. As they sprinted through the forest, the sounds of pursuit echoed behind them. But this time Isabella wasn't running away. She wasn't just trying to escape. She was running toward something. Toward the power she had just unlocked. Toward the future she had to protect. Suddenly, the trees ahead of them shifted, and a figure stepped out from the shadows, blocking their path. Isabella's heart stopped. She recognized him immediately, Aiden. His tall, broad-shouldered form was bathed in the cold light of the moon, his eyes gleaming with malice. He stepped forward with slow, deliberate movements, his lips curling into a smirk as he eyed Isabella. You're still running, huh? Aiden's voice was deep, smooth like velvet, but filled with a venomous undertone. I thought you'd know better by now, Izzy. Running won't save you. Zane immediately stepped forward, his stance protective as he placed himself between Isabella and Aiden. Get out of our way, Aiden, he growled, his voice low but full of warning. Aiden's eyes flicked to Zane, then back to Isabella, his smirk widening. Ah, Zane. Still trying to play the hero? He clicked his tongue, as though disappointed. You know, it's cute. Really. But it's a wasted effort. You can't stop what's coming. None of you can. Isabella's hands curled into fists, and she stepped around Zane, her gaze fixed on Aiden. You've been chasing me for too long, she said, her voice steady. I'm not running anymore. And I'm not afraid of you. Aiden's smile faded, and for a moment, something darker flashed in his eyes. You should be, he said quietly, his tone shifting to something dangerous. You don't know what you've unleashed. You don't know the power that's inside you. And when the old ones come for you, you'll wish you never crossed me. Isabella felt the surge of energy within her, the child inside her stirring as if responding to Aiden's threat. She could feel the power grow, stronger than ever, but she held it back, focusing on controlling it. It was hers to command now. She wouldn't let it consume her. Without warning, Aiden lunged, his movements a blur. Zane reacted immediately, blocking his path with the speed and precision of a trained fighter. But Aiden was fast, too fast. He sidestepped Zane's strike with ease and aimed a vicious blow toward Isabella. Isabella didn't hesitate. She raised her hand, and with a burst of willpower, she sent a wave of energy rushing toward Aiden. The force was strong enough to knock him off his feet, sending him sprawling into the dirt. For a moment, everything stood still. Aiden slowly rose to his feet, brushing himself off with a mocking smile. Impressive, Izzy. But it won't be enough. Before she could react, the air around them began to shift again, the very fabric of reality warping as the earth beneath them trembled violently. Aiden's expression changed, and for the first time, there was an unmistakable hint of concern in his eyes. The old ones are coming, he muttered under his breath, his eyes darting around. You've really done it now. Isabella could feel it too, the weight of their power, the impending doom that seemed to settle over the forest like a storm cloud. The moment had come. The old ones had finally arrived. As the first cracks of thunder rumbled through the sky, the ground beneath their feet began to quake with an intensity that rattled their bones. And then, from the depths of the forest, they came. Figures, dark, towering, and ancient, emerged from the trees, their eyes glowing with an unholy light. The air around them was thick with energy, the kind of power that Isabella could feel in her very soul. There was no mistaking it now. The old ones had arrived. Aiden's face twisted into a grimace as he stepped back. They're here, he whispered, his voice filled with a mix of awe and fear. You can't run anymore, Isabella. This is the end. But Isabella didn't move. She didn't flinch. The old ones had come for her. But now, she was ready. And this time, she wasn't going to back down. Chapter 19, The Reckoning. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the ancient figures emerged from the trees. Their forms were unlike anything Isabella had ever seen, tall, imposing, and shrouded in a darkness that seemed to warp the very air around them. They were the embodiment of ancient power, beings who had existed long before vampires, werewolves, or any of the creatures that roamed the earth now. The air crackled with energy, as though the world itself had stopped spinning in reverence. Isabella could feel it, that palpable weight that threatened to suffocate her, the darkness pressing in from all sides. The old ones were here, and they had come for her. Zane stood next to her, his body rigid, his eyes scanning the figures with a sharp, calculating gaze. His stance was defensive, but even Isabella could see that he understood the gravity of the situation. These were not just enemies, they were ancient, unstoppable forces. Aiden had stepped back, his expression a mixture of fear and resignation. The smug confidence he had carried in their previous encounters had disappeared. Now, he looked almost afraid. You've unleashed something far beyond your understanding, Isabella, Aiden said, his voice tense. The old ones don't just take what they want. They consume. They will take everything, and they will leave nothing but ashes behind. Isabella's heart pounded, but the fear that had once consumed her had faded, replaced by a strange calm. She had no intention of letting them take her child. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was a force of nature, and she would fight for what was hers. Her eyes locked onto the first of the old ones, a towering figure with skin as pale as bone and eyes that glowed with a sickly green light. It wasn't just a person, it was a being that radiated power, its mere presence sucking the warmth from the air. The old one's voice was like thunder, deep and resonant, echoing through the clearing. Isabella, child of both worlds, bearer of the key, you have defied the laws of nature. You have broken the balance. You will submit. The words hit her like a physical blow, but Isabella stood tall, her body tense with the surge of energy that still flowed through her. She could feel the child within her, responding to the power in the air, stirring with an energy she could barely comprehend. It was as if the child and the old ones were connected by some ancient force, but Isabella refused to let that connection define her. I will not submit, she said, her voice steady, her gaze unwavering. You will not have my child. The old one's eyes flickered with a hint of amusement, but it was a cold, calculating amusement. You will submit. There is no other way. Your power is nothing compared to the ancient forces we control. We are the keepers of balance. And you are nothing but a disruption. Zane's voice cut through the tension, low and dangerous. You're wrong. Isabella is more than you think. She's not a disruption. She's the one who will bring balance. The old one turned its attention to Zane, its gaze cold and unblinking. You speak as if she is your equal. But she is nothing more than a pawn. And in the end, she will do as she's told. As all beings of her kind do. Isabella felt the power inside her flare, rising like a tide, pushing against the confines of her control. Her instinct screamed at her to fight, to resist. She wasn't a pawn. She would never be a pawn again. A sudden burst of energy shot out from her hands, a wave of raw force that collided with the old one, sending it stumbling back. The other ancient figures watched, unmoving, but the moment was enough for Isabella to feel the full weight of her power. She had more control now, more focus. You're wrong, Isabella said again, her voice cutting through the oppressive air. I'm not a pawn. And neither is my child. The old one slowly rose to its feet, brushing off the dirt and debris with a flick of its hand. Its glowing eyes met hers, filled with cold fury. You think you can fight us? You think you can fight the forces of time and fate? It growled, its voice filled with ancient venom. You will not win, Isabella. The child within you is a weapon we will control. And when the time comes, you will bend to our will. Isabella stepped forward, her body alight with power. No, the word was simple, but it was filled with an unyielding conviction. I will never bend to you. I choose my child's fate. Not you. Not anyone. The old one's eyes flashed, and for a moment, the world seemed to shift. The wind howled, the earth trembled beneath them, and the sky itself seemed to darken, as if the very forces of nature were responding to their clash. Zane moved next to her, his eyes never leaving the approaching figures. Stay close, he warned, his voice steady despite the overwhelming pressure of the moment. We'll make them regret underestimating us. Isabella nodded, her breath steadying as she felt the surge of power within her. The child stirred again, and she could sense the connection between them deepening, the power of their bond undeniable. This is our fight, she thought. We fight together. But the old ones weren't done. The leader of the group, a towering figure with blackened skin and eyes that glowed like molten gold, raised a hand toward them. The air around them crackled, and the very earth began to split, jagged cracks forming beneath their feet. Your defiance will cost you, the old one said, its voice echoing like a death knell. You have no place in this world, Isabella. And we will tear down everything you hold dear to prove it. The ground beneath their feet cracked open, a deep fissure splitting the earth in two, sending a shockwave through the air that threatened to knock them off balance. Isabella's heart skipped, but she gritted her teeth, pushing through the panic. She could feel the energy from the earth rising, the elemental power that had been awakened within her. This was her moment. This was her fight. She raised her hands, focusing the power inside her, directing it outward. The earth responded, the cracks in the ground sealing themselves, the trees around them bending with the force of her command. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for her child. For the future. With a forceful scream, she released the energy, sending a wave of pure, raw power hurtling toward the old ones. The ground shook violently, the trees groaning as the energy crashed into the ancient beings, sending them stumbling back, their expressions momentarily shifting from arrogance to surprise. But they weren't defeated. They never would be. The golden-eyed leader snarled, its form shifting like smoke, disappearing into the shadows of the trees, reappearing behind them in the blink of an eye. "You can fight us all you want, Isabella," it hissed, its voice seething with ancient rage. "But in the end, you will submit. The child will belong to the old ones." Isabella's heart hammered in her chest, but she stood tall, the fire inside her burning brighter than ever before. "Not today," she said, her voice strong and full of resolve. "Not ever." Zane stepped forward, his eyes blazing with the same fierce determination. "We fight, Izzy. Together. And we'll keep fighting until the end." The old ones had come for her. But this time, she would not back down. This time, she would not be their pawn. They would either break or bend before her strength, before the power she was finally learning to control. And together with Zane by her side, Isabella knew she would not lose. Chapter 20, Into the Abyss. The tension in the air was thick, a palpable force that seemed to squeeze the life from the very atmosphere around them. Isabella's power hummed beneath her skin, crackling like a storm about to break. Her gaze never wavered from the golden-eyed leader of the old ones, the ancient being that had spoken with such certainty moments before. Its words echoed in her mind, but she refused to let them shape her. She had already made her choice. "You will submit," the old one hissed again, its voice cold and dark, the weight of centuries in its tone. "The child belongs to the balance." Isabella's chest tightened, but the defiance inside her grew stronger. The child didn't belong to the balance. It belonged to her. And as much as these beings wanted to control her future, she would not let them. Zane stood beside her, his sword in hand, his stance as firm and unwavering as ever. He was ready, but there was something in his eyes that spoke of a depth of worry. Worry for her. He could feel the intensity of what was at stake, just as she did. But it wasn't just her power, or even her child. It was the entire world that would be affected by this. If the old ones had their way, everything she loved would be destroyed. And she would never allow that. The golden-eyed leader stepped forward again, its massive form shifting in the darkness like a shadow, an almost ethereal presence that seemed to absorb the very light. "You cannot fight us forever, Isabella. You think you can control this power, but it is too much for you. Even now, I can feel it unraveling inside you. It's already breaking you." A wave of cold dread washed over her, but she didn't let it show. "Breaking me? No." She would not let the old ones have that power over her. Her child, the blood that ran through her, was too important to let it slip away, too precious to fall into their hands. "I've already broken free of your control," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "You may think you have power, but it's nothing compared to what's inside me. You won't take my child." Zane glanced at her, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something in his expression, a recognition, a shared understanding. "She's right. We're not going down without a fight." But even as he spoke, the air grew darker. The other old ones, shrouded in cloaks of shadows, moved forward, their eyes glowing with the same malicious intensity as their leader. Each of them was a towering figure, their very presence casting long shadows that seemed to stretch across the clearing. It was clear now that they weren't just here for Isabella. They weren't just here to destroy. They were here to take everything. Without warning, the ground beneath them cracked open, a deep chasm widening with a deafening roar. Isabella staggered back, her body instinctively responding to the overwhelming force. A howling wind whipped through the forest, the trees bending under the power of whatever dark magic the old ones were summoning. But this time, Isabella wasn't just reacting. This time, she understood. The connection between her and her child deepened, and as she focused on it, she could feel the earth itself responding to her call. The power inside her surged once again, more controlled this time. The elements, the earth, the very fabric of nature itself, it was all within her reach. With a deep breath, she raised her hands, focusing every ounce of energy on the chasm in front of them. The ground trembled, and the wind roared as she bent the earth to her will, the cracks in the earth closing, the very soil rising in defense. The ancient figures tried to advance, but the earth fought back, a shield of stone and roots pushing against their movements. The golden-eyed leader snarled in frustration, its voice a low growl. "You cannot stop what is already in motion. The old ones will is unstoppable." Isabella met its gaze, her own eyes burning with the same intensity. "Maybe your will is unstoppable. But my will? My child's will? That's where you're wrong." With a fierce cry, Isabella thrust her hands forward, the energy inside her flowing out in an explosion of raw force. The earth shuddered, the sky above them crackling with lightning, and the wind howled in response. The sheer intensity of the blast sent the old ones stumbling back, their shadows flickering as the power collided with their very beings. For a moment, everything went silent. The air was thick, heavy with the aftermath of the energy that had just been unleashed. The old ones were on their knees, struggling to regain their footing, their ancient eyes wide with shock. Even they had not anticipated this. Zane took a step forward, his expression resolute. "Isabella, we need to move. This won't hold them for long." Isabella nodded, her breath ragged, but her resolve stronger than ever. They were not done yet. She had unleashed something ancient, something deep within her, and it was far from over. But just as they began to move, the golden-eyed leader rose again, its eyes blazing with fury. "You dare defy us?" it thundered, its voice shaking the very ground beneath their feet. "You have no idea what you've done. You will pay for your defiance." A dark energy began to gather around the leader, a vortex of pure, destructive power swirling in its hands. It was a force unlike anything Isabella had ever felt. This was the full weight of the old one's magic, and it was coming for them. Isabella didn't hesitate. She could feel the power swelling within her, her child's power pushing against her skin. This was the moment where everything would change. This was the fight she had to win, not just for her, but for everything. With a fierce cry, she raised her hands again, summoning the full force of the earth and sky. The wind howled as she called upon the very elements, the trees around them bending as though responding to her command. The old ones might have been ancient, but she was their equal now. Her child was the key to a new balance, one that didn't bow to their will. The golden-eyed leader's form flickered again, a shadow, as Isabella's power collided with the vortex of dark magic. The shockwave was immense, a violent clash of ancient forces that shook the forest to its roots. But Isabella held her ground. She wasn't just fighting for her life anymore. She was fighting for a future. The earth cracked open beneath them, a massive rift forming as the battle raged on. The trees bent and twisted, but Isabella remained unwavering, her eyes locked on the golden-eyed leader, whose once confident expression was now filled with fear. "You will not take what's mine," she shouted, pushing the full force of her power against the darkness. In one final, explosive moment, the old one's dark magic faltered, the vortex collapsing in on itself. The earth shuddered, the sky itself seeming to tear apart as the energy was absorbed by the very ground. The silence that followed was deafening. Zane was by her side, his hand on her shoulder as he steadied her. "We did it," he said, his voice a whisper. Isabella's body trembled with exhaustion, but her heart was filled with a quiet sense of victory. They had won this battle. But she knew, this was only the beginning. The old ones had been driven back, but they would return. And when they did, Isabella would be ready. With one last look at the darkened clearing, she turned to Zane, her resolve solidifying. We keep fighting. We keep moving. No one is taking my child. No one. Zane nodded, a fierce fire in his eyes. Together. Always. And with that, they turned, leaving the battlefield behind, knowing that the fight for their future was far from over. But as long as they had each other, they would keep going. Chapter 21, The Road Ahead. The forest was eerily still as Isabella and Zane made their way through the trees. The battle with the old ones had left its mark, but as the adrenaline began to fade, so too did the tension in their limbs. They had survived. For now. Isabella felt the weight of her powers inside her, still crackling beneath her skin like a distant storm, and for the first time, it felt like a part of her that she could control. She wasn't sure how much longer she could keep that control. There was always the nagging fear that the energy could overwhelm her. But for the moment, she was in command. But the battle had only just begun. She could feel it in her bones, in the very air around her. The old ones were not finished with her. They would come again. But so would she. She had no choice. She glanced sideways at Zane, who walked next to her, his usually composed demeanor now tinged with fatigue. Despite his outward calm, she knew that he too felt the weight of the events that were unfolding. They had fought together, side by side, but there was no illusion anymore. This was a war they couldn't escape. A war that would test everything they had. We need to get out of here, Zane said quietly, his eyes scanning their surroundings as if he expected another attack at any moment. We can't stay in one place for long. They know we're here now. The old ones will send more. Isabella nodded, her steps heavy but determined. I know. We keep moving. For hours, they made their way through the dense forest, every snap of a twig or rustle of the leaves sending Isabella's heart into overdrive. She had never been more aware of the dangers lurking in the shadows. Every minute felt like a countdown, like the earth itself was waiting for the next strike. Zane led her through the underbrush, his movements fluid and practiced. He had been in countless battles, fought for countless causes, but this was different. This was personal. This was a fight for survival. And the stakes had never been higher. We need somewhere safe, Zane muttered. We can't outrun the old ones forever. If we don't regroup, we'll never be able to fight them on our terms. Isabella swallowed, the weight of his words pressing down on her. I don't even know where to go. Everywhere I turn, there's another danger waiting. I can't keep running, Zane. Zane glanced at her, his amber eyes softening for a moment. I know. But right now, we need to stay alive. We'll find somewhere to lay low for a while, somewhere we can figure out what to do next. But we can't fight them head-on until we're ready. The old ones are too powerful. Isabella's gaze hardened as she stared ahead, her voice steady. Then we'll make ourselves ready. I won't let them take my child. Zane's silence was a quiet affirmation of her resolve. They were both running on the same fire, the same unwavering determination. And though the path ahead was uncertain, Isabella knew one thing: she would never stop fighting. Not for herself. Not for her child. Suddenly, the trees ahead parted, revealing a small clearing bathed in moonlight. At the center, an ancient stone structure stood. It was weathered by time, its surface covered in thick ivy, but it radiated an undeniable sense of safety. There was something in the air, a quiet reassurance that made Isabella pause. Zane stopped beside her, his hand on the hilt of his blade. This is it, he said quietly, his eyes scanning the area. This is the place. Isabella's breath caught as she took in the sight. What is it? A hideout? Zane nodded. Something like that. It's a neutral ground. The elders, those who aren't aligned with the old ones, use it. We'll be safe here. For a time. Isabella's gaze shifted back to the stone structure. There was something ancient about it, something powerful. She could feel the energy in the air, the very pulse of the earth humming beneath her feet. It was a place of sanctuary, but it was also a place of secrets. As they approached, the doors of the structure creaked open, seemingly on their own. The air inside was cool, filled with the scent of old wood and damp stone. The walls were lined with ancient runes, etched into the stone in patterns Isabella didn't understand. But there was no mistaking the sense of power that filled the space. Zane led her inside, his hand never leaving the grip of his sword, his posture alert. "Stay close," he said, his voice low. Isabella nodded, her senses heightened. She could feel the presence of something else in the air, a low hum that resonated with her very being. She had been in the presence of power before, but this place, it was different. It wasn't just a refuge. It was a place of ancient knowledge. As they walked deeper into the structure, they reached the heart of the stone building. At the center, a large table made of dark stone stood, covered with scrolls, maps, and relics of ages long past. The walls were lined with shelves of old tomes, their contents mysterious, filled with secrets of a world Isabella could barely comprehend. A figure stepped forward from the shadows, a tall woman, her hair silver, her eyes a pale blue that shimmered like ice. She wore robes of deep green, the fabric flowing around her as she moved. There was an air of ancient wisdom about her, a presence that immediately put Isabella on edge. "Zane," the woman said, her voice smooth but filled with authority. "You've brought her here." Zane gave a curt nod. "Yes, I have. This is Isabella. And we need your help." The woman studied Isabella with a gaze that seemed to pierce through her, as if she were reading the very essence of her soul. "The child," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "The one within you. It is not just power. It is a force that will either save or destroy us all. And you have already begun to awaken it." Isabella felt a chill run down her spine as the woman spoke. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman's gaze softened slightly, but her voice remained steady. "You are carrying more than just a child, Isabella. The child is the key to an ancient force, one that has been waiting to either restore balance or tear this world apart. You have only just begun to tap into it. But there is so much more within you, so much more that will be awakened." Isabella's heart raced. "I can feel it," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "The power. It's overwhelming." The woman nodded. "It is. And it will be the key to your survival. But you cannot control it alone. Not yet. The old ones are coming. They will stop at nothing to claim what is yours. But you have the power to stop them. But first, you must learn how to wield it. You must understand it, Isabella." Zane stepped forward, his voice firm. "We're ready. We've fought them before. We'll fight them again." The woman's gaze turned to him, her eyes sharp, calculating. "You will fight. But you need to understand something, both of you. The old ones don't just want control of the child. They want control of everything. The balance. The fate of every living being. If you fail to master this power, you will become a part of their plan." Isabella's throat tightened, but there was no turning back now. She had no choice but to understand it. To embrace it. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said, her voice full of resolve. "I'll protect my child. I'll protect our future." The woman nodded slowly. "Then we begin." As she spoke, the ground beneath Isabella's feet seemed to hum with the power of ages, the ancient energy of the stone building pulsing through her. She was no longer just running from her fate. She was preparing to fight for it. The battle ahead would not be easy. But Isabella knew one thing: she was not fighting alone. Not anymore. Together with Zane, she would face the coming storm. Together, they would fight for everything. Chapter 22, Unraveling the Power. The room seemed to pulse with a heavy silence after the woman's final words. Isabella could feel the weight of her resolve settling deeper into her bones. There was no turning back. She was already caught in the web of fate, and if she wanted to survive, if she wanted her child to have a future, she had to understand the power that had begun to unravel inside her. The woman, who still hadn't given her name, took a step forward. Her pale blue eyes locked onto Isabella with an intensity that made her feel as if the woman was looking into the very marrow of her being. The room was dim, but the shadows flickered with a kind of energy, an ancient presence that seemed to seep out of the walls, the floor, and even the air. "Isabella," the woman said, her voice now softer but still filled with weight, "you've already started to awaken the power within you. That was no mere instinct, what you did with Thorn and the others, that was control, albeit uncontrolled. But it's there. I can feel it." Isabella swallowed hard. "I don't know how to control it. Every time I use it, I feel like I'm on the verge of losing myself. Like it could consume me." The woman nodded solemnly, her expression unchanged. "That's exactly what it can do. But not just to you. To everything you care about. The more you harness it, the more it will want to consume you, until nothing is left but ash. The old ones understand this. They have known it for centuries." Isabella's hand instinctively went to her stomach, her fingers brushing lightly against the curve. The child inside her, growing stronger with every passing day, was a force, a beacon of something larger than herself. "I can feel it," Isabella murmured, a chill running down her spine. "It's connected to the earth. To everything. To the old ones. I didn't ask for this. I didn't choose it." The woman took another step closer, her presence commanding, though her voice was still soft. "No one chooses this. It is the fate of those like you, hybrids, born of two worlds. But you must understand, this power, this energy, is older than time itself. The child inside you is the key to something far greater. You cannot deny it. The old ones have known about you since the moment you were conceived. You are a disruption in their plan." Zane shifted beside Isabella, his gaze sharp as he took in the woman's every word. His hand rested on the hilt of his sword, but there was a quiet strength in his eyes. He wasn't just here to protect her, he was here to fight with her, even if the odds seemed insurmountable. Isabella's mind raced. "So, what do I do now? I'm not ready to face them. I can barely control this power inside me. I don't even know how to begin." The woman's eyes softened, though her tone remained firm. "That's why you're here. We don't have much time. The old ones are already moving, and they will not rest until they have what's inside you." Isabella clenched her fists at her sides. "I won't let them take my child." The woman gave a small nod, her expression unchanging. "You don't have to. But you need to understand how to wield the power within you before they force you to." She turned and gestured for them to follow as she walked deeper into the stone sanctuary. The flickering light cast long shadows on the walls, illuminating symbols carved into the stone, symbols Isabella couldn't understand but somehow felt drawn to. The woman led them to an inner chamber, a circular room with a stone floor. In the center stood a large stone altar, surrounded by faded runes. The air here felt different, thicker, almost vibrating with an ancient energy. "This is the place where the knowledge is kept," the woman said as she motioned for them to stand near the altar. "The elders used this place to connect with the earth and understand the true depth of the power your child holds. I will show you how to begin." Isabella took a cautious step forward, Zane at her side. The chamber felt alive in a way she couldn't quite explain, and as she approached the altar, she could feel the power in the room thrum with intensity. The woman raised her hands, and a faint, glowing light began to pulse from the runes on the walls, illuminating the room with an eerie glow. "Close your eyes, Isabella. Feel the energy of the earth beneath you. Feel your child's presence. It is not just a part of you, it is a part of this world. It has the potential to shape the very foundations of reality." Isabella hesitated for a moment but then closed her eyes. She felt it immediately, the earth beneath her feet, the weight of the world, and then, something deeper. The child inside her, alive, growing, connected to everything. The power pulsed in waves, and for the first time, she let it flow through her. The woman's voice filled the air again, this time softer, more melodic. "Feel the balance, Isabella. You must learn to harness the earth, the air, the fire, and the water. They are all within you. And you must control them, or they will consume you. Isabella focused harder, reaching out with her senses. She could feel the earth beneath her, the warmth of the fire within her, and the coolness of the air as it moved around her. The water of the earth, the life force of every living thing, was there, waiting for her to command it. But it was overwhelming. So much power, so many forces, each pulling at her from within. The chaos threatened to take over her mind, and she gasped, clutching the stone altar for support. Her breath came in sharp gasps, her head spinning. Zane was there in an instant, his hand on her arm. "Izzy, you need to focus. I'm here. You're not alone." She locked eyes with him, his voice grounding her, pulling her back from the edge. She reached deep within herself, letting the storm of power settle. Control. Focus. And then, she felt it, a pulse, steady and calm, as the energy within her began to align. She could feel the earth responding, the very stones beneath her feet humming with life. The elements weren't just separate forces, they were connected. And she was the key. For a long moment, she just stood there, breathing slowly, feeling the power surge within her, yet holding it steady. The woman stepped forward, her voice filled with approval. "You've begun, Isabella. But this is only the beginning. The old ones will be back soon. When they return, you must be ready." Isabella nodded, the weight of the responsibility pressing down on her. She didn't feel ready. She wasn't sure she ever would be. But she knew one thing, she wouldn't let them take her child.